OTB AM with Gillette in association with Movember. Effortless shave, magnificent modes.
Indeed, 7:30 on this Thursday morning, November the 3rd, with myself, Shane Hannon, on OTB AM, brought to you live each morning by Gillette Labs in association with Movember. Effortless shave, magnificent mo. You can sign up or donate now at movember.com. Delighted to be joined this morning by the broadcaster and journalist and esteemed Galway man, Johnny Ward. Good morning, Johnny.
That's the story, Shane. Galway will be a team later on, as you find out.
It will, of course. Yeah. And, of course, the esteemed Cork man and OTB AM producer, Colin Boohey. Good morning, Colin.
Morning, Johnny. Morning, Shane.
How are we keeping? It's like, I was going to say, like Frank Lampard's Chelsea, or
Damien
Duff's Shelburne. It's like Galway's Johnny Ward and Cork's Colin Boohey. I feel like it's relevant and necessary, just to give the geographical.
We hold on to
background.
it. Really lost our accents, I think.
No.
Have you?
No,
you've kind of. I find the Galway accent is
flat enough anyway.
I would put that forward at Dublin Airport for a first-time visitor. I find it's the friendliest. There's a nice Irishness to it, but it's understandable.
Galway.
Yeah, I like the Galway accent.
It's obviously not the best Irish accent, which would...
No, I know, that's a different category, as you can tell by what I'm saying.
That'll be North Monaghan, I would say, Johnny. I might be biased.
Really endearing. In a July evening.
Well, that's South Monaghan.
Okay.
That there is South Monaghan, hey. If you're from Inniskeen, you're talking a bit like that there.
Jesus.
I know, it's fairly close to Louth.
It's near, yeah.
That's very jarring at 7:31 a.m. actually.
Sorry for anyone offended this morning or pulling in off the road. Concentrate. Yeah, the North Monaghan, I'll speak in my regular accent.
It's more refined, obviously.
It's more of a Tommy Bow.
Yeah.
Monaghan Town accent, yeah. And nothing against South Monaghan accent. It's perfectly fine. Rory Larmer, a good friend of yours, is a South Monaghan man from Carrick.
Would that be a typical Rory accent, what you just did there?
I know.
He's softer.
It's a bit softer than that. He's probably been in Dublin.
He's in Dublin a long time,
So he's soft. Yeah. Banty McEnany would have to.
Yeah.
Or typically cut off, kinda. Yeah. I'll stop now, guys. Just a second, I'll stop.
Don't
stop.
Let's do an accents hour.
Exactly. Before we get into football, just want to bring you what's coming up on the show across the rest of this morning. So 7:32, we've got
South Monaghan accents for the start.
South Monaghan accents for start. Anyway, I won't do the whole coming up in this accent, but you're long. 7:55, Lee Keegan. The Mayo player, and of course Westport helped Westport win their first ever Mayo Senior Football Championship title at the weekend. So he'll be feeling a bit ropey, no doubt, after the celebrations, but we'll check in with him. Luke Connolly then, Nemo Rangers and Corkman, 8:10 to reflect on Nemo Rangers again winning the Cork Senior Football Championship. You had to be there. The latest episode this week with Johnny Ward as he brings us through 5 of the greatest moments and sporting events that he's attended in person himself. 8:50 we'll have Davy Burke, the new Roscommon senior football boss, in studio with us. So he's one of the youngest managers. I think he is the youngest manager, in fact, in Indocardy football at the minute, and fascinating backstory as well, the Kildare man. So he'll be in with us. 9:10 we'll talk to Jack McGrath about his own injury story. He's of course a free agent now after being released by Ulster. He's a former Leinster man and a Lion, of course, as well, and we'll look ahead to the South Africa game on Saturday with him, and then we'll get some of the highlights from Wednesday night rugby at 9:30 then on the show as well. Champions League last night, lads. The group stages came to a conclusion. We won't have Champions League groups now, or Champions League action, until February. The Man City game was one I was keeping a reasonably close eye on last night, and the 17-year-old Rico Lewis. So he was born in November 2004.
Jesus.
Which kind of, so I was thinking even last night, what happened? So the Euro 2004, Ricardo with the gloves off and the penalty shootout against us, so he wasn't even alive for that, which is reasonably terrifying. But even Pep Guardiola spoke about him after the match. He said he's very intelligent. His movement off the ball is really good for a player of his age. Took the goal well. Maybe the keeper could have done better, but really solid talent, and you could see the look on his face when he scored. He's the youngest ever Champions League starter to score a goal in the competition, and his face was just lit up. And Cole Palmer, his good friend, came over to him, and the two of them were buzzing. So what a moment for him. What were you doing at 17?
I went to college at 17, I think. 19.
That's fairly young, is it?
2000. Yeah, 2000. We didn't have a.
You skipped transition year.
Didn't have one. My
school
started
was play school early.
Always been in play school really, but our school didn't have history, which was definitely to my detriment, because I would have liked history. Didn't have it at all in the curriculum, and it was more of a technical kind of school, but it didn't have transitioners. So you think you start college at 17, you were wet behind the ears, you really didn't know much about life at all, and you were just thrown into life in Dublin. But certainly things were going better for Rico Lewis, and there was a nice story, because I've said before, the Man City thing, they're amazing to watch. It doesn't give me great joy seeing them, the way the club is run, but they do, by all accounts, have a very good youth set up there, and they bring a lot of good young players through. And I just had to look him up. He's from Bury, which is quite interesting because what a contrast. Like, Bury were put into administration in recent years because of there are lots of clubs around the Manchester area who became kind of like basket cases financially. Oldham were another one, knocked out of the Football League despite John Sheridan going in and out. And then you had Bolton, who were in trouble as well. There were another one or two clubs, Bury in particular, but he's playing for Man City, who don't have any worries in that score. And to be fair, it was actually it was a lovely strike. The goalie could have done better, but he did play really well. And it was so flat compared to the Marseille atmosphere. Like, Man City already through. The atmosphere at the Etihad is fairly, like, it's soporific at times, really, particularly last night. And but it got going a bit in the second half, and De Bruyne came on, and what a ball for the second goal, and City got the job.
The ball, sorry, the Kevin De Bruyne pass.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, sorry, we shouldn't be surprised that Kevin De Bruyne can pass a ball like that, but
the COCOM said he sees things that other people don't see. I actually don't really agree with that. I think he sees what really.
He just has the capability to.
He just pulls it off time and time again.
Sees it earlier, maybe.
He sees it early, and he's technique to, like, his pass for, was it the against Man United, the goal that Haaland got at the back post. You're literally talking like split second wrong here, and that doesn't. And there was the same last night. And there was a good line that he said one time: never worry about your pass completion rate. And that's a good example of footballer.
Just keep trying passes.
Just like, because I look at players with 95% pass completion rate in a match. I didn't even know you were playing. Like, you always know De Bruyne's
sideways passes,
just keeping the ball, and that's important maybe if you're in the holding role. But like De Bruyne, just comes on and just lights everything up.
They were poor enough in the first half, City, but then, as Pep said after the match, they're struggling for motivation because they're already qualified. But then he changed things up. It was the three, as he said himself, Cole Palmer and Foden were very wide in the first half. They're playing a five at the back, so obviously take off Grealish at half time, bring on Rodri, push forward through the middle, and they were much better in the second half.
Dominated second half.
Julian Alvarez was fantastic. Goal and 2 assists.
Lovely goal as well. And they had a tough game at the weekend, and you have to lift yourself again for a bit of a dead rubber. There was obviously some dramatic action elsewhere, but in fairness, you do think City are going to win it this year.
This is the thing. Like, Owen Hargreaves was on BT afterwards, and he said this feels like City's season. And Rio
probably didn't like that for a while, though.
But like, people have said that the last 3 years. Yeah. So, but Haaland is obviously the big difference this season. But is it City's year, lads? I mean, looking at the odds last night, I think City were 7-4. Bayern were next. I don't know what they were. They were maybe 10-3 or something, and then PSG.
Do you want them to win it?
Do I want City to win it?
Like, do you want, like, Guardiola's amazing, but I do enjoy their demise in Europe. I don't like the Man City project at all, really. Like, I think it's kind of soulless in what's happened there, and I don't really want them to win the Champions League.
No.
Yeah, but the fans have said it for a long time that they weren't on board with the Champions League. They're all about the league title. They wanted to win that. I've heard of, like, big Manchester City celebrity fan Noel Gallagher say several times over the years, like, European football, they're only kind of getting into it recently. And then if they do win it this season, you're going to have the Pep Guardiola accusations, like, okay, you've won it 3 times now, but twice is with Messi and once is with Haaland. And I think he'd acknowledge that himself. He'd be like, yeah, I know, but I mean, he still had to do it. He still had to manage them. Like, if they win the Champions League, it'll be a big celebration that night for them. And then the next day, everyone will be like, okay, moving on. That should have happened, and it did happen. So what's going to happen next? It kind of leaves you a bit cold, but like, I like watching City objectively because it's great football, like Kevin De Bruyne. It's actually a really good point that, like, I don't think he does see anything differently to any other player at the top level of the game. It's just he has the ability to pull it off. That's the exact same thing as Haaland. He knows where to be, but he can actually do it. That's what you're watching with City. You're watching near perfection. Yeah, but that's not that enjoyable. That's not enjoyable.
It's not.
Yeah,
it's actually not. And this is like, I'd say I spend less time watching Man City when they're on the TV. We're talking about commentators and like being distracted during the game. I'd say I spend less time watching Man City than any other team when they're on, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
that's actually completely counterintuitive. But near perfection is sometimes a little bit painful or boring. Like.
Well, it's like when you can create your own team in FIFA or Pro Ev back in the day, right? So you do that like as a 15-year-old, like, I'm going to make the perfect team. So everyone's like 99 out of 100. Yeah. And you're just, it's people you know down the road, and like, you're making them unbelievable, right? So then you play a few games, you're 5 games into the league, you've scored like 145 goals, and it's like, all right, This is it. And
It's
that's
not
kind
the
of a
club it
real life
was
thing
at
with Man City.
It's not the club it was at Main Road that I would have grown up knowing, or it's not like the Marseille of Tuesday night where like this is a real like. It's
the Niall Quinn club. That's not the Man
Well,
City.
look, they invested in Manchester City in 2008, but it had nothing to do with Man City. They just chose this club that were like, well, I think that's where we're going to put the money in. So it's a completely different club to what it used to be. But having said that, they've run it absolutely brilliantly. Whatever you say about how nefarious it might be in the background, like it's a fantastically well-run club, and like they have a brilliant manager, and he does all the right things with the players most of the time until he goes into his jazz solo mode and big games and like decides to try stuff that's way harder than it needs to be. But other than that, I think they've pretty much ticked all the boxes on what you need to do. The only thing that's missing is the Champions League. If they win that this year, grand, they might retain it next season. And then, hopefully for the rest of us, Pep Guardiola might say, all right, I've had enough now, and he can move on.
Yeah.
And it'll be really interesting to see what happens with City after Pep, just like Liverpool after Klopp.
I think that the biggest football bet I've had in a long time was Man City to beat Liverpool at Anfield this year. And I was on here on the Saturday saying this is going to be 3-1, 4-1. And JD said, Man City are good when they're in control, right? And once Man City went 1-0 down that game, that word was echoing in my ear. It was like, they're not going to come back here. And that would just, if they do meet Liverpool later on in the competition, or they meet like Bayern or somebody, will they be in control? And they still have that little bit of mental wobble to prove, because they haven't gotten over the line, and Liverpool are just hanging on in there. This is their focus now, winning the Champions League, I think, and obviously getting fourth. But who knows?
I guess the danger is putting all your eggs in one basket for Liverpool, and they were great as a cup team last year as well as pushing for the league title, but you wonder how much you can push on all fronts, especially with the World Cup happening and disruption to the season. Reset button is this phrase that keeps being used, but I mean, City just watching them last night is, you can enjoy it to an extent, as in like, this is brilliant football to watch. De Bruyne is brilliant, Rodri's brilliant, Foden is class, the youngsters as well, but there is a part of it that's diluted by where they got their money. It's diluted by the fact that they're so good that you're like, I might switch over to the Chelsea game now, or I might.
But look, that's our age group. That's what we think about it. But then, if you're asking younger people, like 10 or 15 years younger, they're probably delighted with this. It's like, it is great football, and it's what you try to replicate yourself out playing with your friends or playing with your local club. Like, that's what you're trying to do. So, like, the football quality has never been better in my lifetime than it is now. It's like, it's so much superior. If you watch, like, I watched recently, back for something that we were doing, I watched the 1999 Champions League final back, Manchester United against Bayern Munich. I watched the whole thing. Dire.
Yeah.
Oh my God! In comparison to modern football, unbelievably slow.
It doesn't matter.
Slow paced.
Like, I'll
really
talk about like
inaccurate passing, very slow off the mark. Really kind of like shots which lack any finesse at all. Compared to nowadays, where the weakest player on the team would have been a very, very strong player back then, technically. So that side of the game has actually come on so much. What they've sacrificed is the kind of the fun side of it.
I remember at I think my parents' 25th wedding anniversary, there was a fella up on the stage. He was a local fella, and he was on about his youth in rural Ireland, and he said, we had nothing, but we were happy, right? And that always stuck with me. And in those days, the football was all we knew. We didn't know any better. That was like, so everyone was equal, and that was the best football on display. And I'll talk about a Gaelic game from 2001 in my little piece later on. I watched that back a few years ago. It was terrible. Like, it was so, but that didn't matter. No. That's all we knew. And what matters to me is that this is not a working class game anymore. So if I'm at the Etihad last night, which itself is named after something that's nothing to do with Manchester, and Manchester City score, and you look at the crowd and they're just taking photos, you're like, that's not Main Road. That's not the working class game that it used to be. And that's why it will never mean that much to me watching Man City.
And I don't think we'll ever go back. It will never go back to that time that we're talking about. It just wouldn't. Because why would it? Because the game makes way too much money. People make way too much money from it. So why in the world?
You have like FC Manchester or FC United or whatever they're called. That's like, there is that kind of movement towards like the non-league game in England as a form of protest. But
as an alternative.
But it's not going back. It's globalised because it's so good.
If you're following mainstream football, like, you have to acknowledge the fact that this is what it's going to be from now on, really, and then you have to try and take the positives from it, which is, well, at least the standard of football is excellent.
It
is.
Well,
and I think it's pretty undeniable.
It's amazing when you're at a game. The speed is amazing.
Stop! It's ridiculous. I was actually chatting to a lad in London last week, and he's a big Altrincham fan, non-league football, and he said you have to come over and go to it. Like, I'll show you the match and the match day experience and the pub beforehand, and you can meet the kitchen ladies after and the players. And I was like, this this sounds brilliant, because I go over to Old Trafford and, you know, there's other people watching and listening this morning who probably go over to Liverpool or Man City or Chelsea or Leeds or whoever, Villa, and it's, you know, it's enjoyable. It's a day out, but it's there's something missing from it.
There is.
The character that maybe you get in League of Ireland. I remember going to Man United matches as a kid, and that had the character of the non-league. It certainly had character. But I mean, that's the sort of thing you're kind of like. I'm going to Villa Park on Sunday, and I've never been, so there's the novelty aspect to it. But then when you're there, you're like, oh, it's just a Premier League game.
It's meant to be a huge pitch. Paul Scholes
Is
said.
it?
Yeah,
right.
Loved playing in it. Not just because he scored that Wonder Valley, but he said it's a great pitch.
Must be a decent atmosphere, because it was often picked for FA Cup.
Oh yeah,
semi-finals.
yeah.
I think they're a moody audience, the Villa fans.
Yeah,
they're right.
Counts. Yeah.
Well, it's Emery's first game, so maybe they're
feel good will be there.
they're feeling okay.
Yeah.
The Chelsea game last night as well, lads. I mean, I was watching Ben Chilwell pull his hamstring and then carried to the tunnel, and the post-mortem, of course, came afterwards on the
Literally,
yeah,
because he was practically dead.
He was practically dead. Like I hope he's okay. Obviously, injury-wise, but just Jesus. I was listening to Rio Ferdinand and Joe Cole on BT afterwards, and you'd actually swear he had passed away. And I mean,
Tragedy.
Like that word was used. Oh, it's a tragedy. And like I was saying to you before we came on air, like when I interviewed Clive Tilsley a couple of years ago, he said that's one thing he doesn't do in his commentary is use words like tragedy, because of Hillsborough, because of Heysel, because of actual tragedies that happen in football. And that struck a chord with me. I was like, Jesus, that makes sense. Like, your choice of words is so important, and maybe something that you don't think of too often. But to call something like, look, it's a personal massive blow, I'm sure, for Ben Chilwell if he doesn't make the World Cup. But we get this every World Cup. You know, Pogba's out. Pogba will probably release a 10,000 word statement on his missing the World Cup, and
he's extremely blessed, like absolutely blessed to have this ability to have so much wealth in his life. This is not a tragedy.
No.
He will wake up the following morning and he'll still be an awful lot luckier than any of us.
still be in his mansion.
He'll still be in his mansion.
Yeah, but that perspective is long lost on these players, lads, because that's all they've known. Like, so for their world, it's a personal sporting tragedy. The problem is they didn't give that context when they used the word tragic, but that's what they mean. They don't mean it's a global tragedy in the world events.
I know, but the choice, like,
that's the way I see it.
Like
They're
the
just
Three
talking about
Grumps
sport.
segment here every morning now, like, yeah.
Huh?
It's becoming the Three Grumps segment, like, you know.
No, I'm trying to be the positive guy over here in the corner.
I get the human element, and if I was in Ben Chilwell's shoes, I'd be like, you'd be gutted to miss a World Cup, because you build up for it every 4 years. It's like an Olympian missing the Olympics. But it's just, sometimes football, I think, gets carried away with itself, and the coverage gets carried away with itself, and we forget that it's...
Pat Mullen was champion jockey. He died of pancreatic cancer in his early 40s. That's a tragedy.
Yeah, that's an actual tragedy.
That still lives on in the lives of people. It's still a tragedy. It's not a tragedy to miss a football tournament. I'm sorry.
No, absolutely not. And especially a football tournament like this one, where, as I was listening to Joe and the lads on the what's their segment called, the
Slight Tangent
last night, and they as Joe said, like, how are we all going to feel half an hour after the World Cup final ends, when it's okay, we might get invested in some of the games during the tournament, but as soon as it's over, I think we're all going to feel like we need a shower and feel a little bit dirty for watching it. I
don't think people will feel that way.
No, I think some people
will watch. I think people will watch the games and they'll be like, all right, and they'll get into it, and then I think what's going to happen is every day it'll be like, you'll talk about the match.
Yeah.
And then you'll be like, oh yeah, but you know, who cares, because it's a dodgy World Cup. And then they'll get into the knockout stages of the tournament, and then people will just start talking about the football, because like, we're talking about the context during the tournament now because a ball hasn't been kicked. Matches start, VAR decisions will occur, players will get sent off, someone will get injured, someone will score a wonder goal, and then we're just talking about the football. The reason none of this is ever going to change is because we all get distracted by the football, and the people continue to make money from it. Like, so the world goes on. Yeah. It'll never go back. So what are we going to do? Like, just complain about the World Cup the whole time it's on?
Well, I think
like it shouldn't be on, and then the World Cup's going to continue regardless.
I'd like to see, like, the Australian video that the players released.
That was great.
It was positive. You know, there might be the odd player that wears rainbow laces in support with the LGBT movement. You might have little mini things like that, but I'd like to see something proper. Like, what's that going to do? At the end of the day, all great positive things to do, but I mean, it would have taken, and it's too late now regardless. But
you either boycott it or you don't, and that's really the only thing you can do.
It would have taken a big team to pull out.
Yeah.
Like the Super League, one pulls out and then it's domino effect.
Australia, I thought the Australian video was absolutely brilliant. We played the full thing last week and it was excellent. Like, that's powerful. Hummel's decision not to brand, that's fine. That's fine. You could be cynical and say that's a marketing ploy, but it's probably fine. The little measures like that, like, it'll go down in history in their legacy that Hummel did that the Australian players did that, and that's great.
Yeah.
But like the tournament organisers, like Grant, whatever, it's like the Glazers, United. It's like, yeah, you can hate us if you want, but we're still going to own the club.
Yeah, it's in like the Middle East moment, like the Iranian protests, which kind of have maybe died down in terms of media. They're incredible. Like the bravery of people to stand up for regimes like that,
absolutely.
and essentially women not wearing the hijab. I've been to Iran and I've massive fondness for the place, but most of the people are young and deeply frustrated at life. It's not all the Iranian regime's fault, but to stand up as they have, and people have lost their lives. I think 15 killed in Shiraz over the weekend, and you do have these Middle Eastern regimes that, I think the one good thing that will come out of this is people in Qatar will, there's an awful lot of focus on the human rights in the country, but Qatar is tiny. Like, it's basically a country of expats, and it's almost like we're picking on this. And like, for me, the thing is, you've a World Cup in a place that's like one of the biggest like carbon burners in the world in terms of burning oil, and everything is sports washing when you look at what's happened with the climate, if that makes sense. Because like, without going on about this, like, sports washing itself is sports washing because there's so much crap coming down the tracks, like, and we'll talk about like developing academies, developing players. Like, you're not going to be able to play football in this country very shortly because it's going to be too hot. Like, so, you know, it's almost like everything is sports washing after a while when you realise the bigger picture. Like,
it puts things in perspective a little bit. But good conversation, Adam. I'm sure it's something we'll touch back on as the World Cup approaches in the next 3 weeks. It's really clawing down now. Is the World Cup. OTBAM brought to you live each morning by Gillette Labs for an effortless finish to your day at 7:52 a.m. on this Thursday morning. Delighted to be joined on the line now by the Westport and Mayo star Lee Keegan. Good morning, Lee. How are things?
Good, guys. How are you?
How's the head?
Not bad. Yeah.
It's a lie anyway.
It's a what is it, a Monday club and a Tuesday club, or how do celebrations happen at the minute for club teams?
Well, there's Monday and the Tuesday club, and then I'm too old, so there was no Wednesday club for me. So I had to go back to work, and I have kids at home, so I got the curly finger then, which I'm really happy to give up. But no, it was a great few days, to be honest. Trying to piece back a few things together to make sure they're all good. But yeah, the cup was in good hands, and the crack was had. So
did you have a sing song in Mapaloy's?
No, there's no Mapaloy's. There was a couple other spots now where there was a lot of sing songs. I'm still a bit hoarse. I'm sure you can gather that bit. So and I wouldn't be a great singer, but I let out a few tunes.
You've been to Westport, Shane?
Oh, I've been to Westport. Been to Mapaloy's. Yeah, quality spot. 1-9 to 1-6 Lee against Ballina Stephen Knights. I mean, for people who wouldn't have seen the game or followed the Mayo Championship this year, an incredible achievement. First time Westport have ever won the Mayo Senior Championship, and Ballina as well. Probably heavy favourites going into the game. Is that fair to say?
Absolutely. Big favourites for the game, and rightly justified, to be honest. They were the team scoring goals, at 14 goals scored in 4 games. So they're averaging something like 22.5 points a game. So that speaks volumes for their offence and the way they were playing and setting up. And then ourselves, a lot of talking for us around. We're not playing, like, Westport associated for years with free flowing football and going kind of man to man and basically getting the shootouts. Where this year we kind of went a bit more compact, a bit tighter in defence and a bit of structure, and we only had conceded 1 goal up to that. So it was kind of the scores against the stoppers nearly to a degree, but it's a brilliant feeling to say there to win the first one. It's really special for the club, to be honest, and it's a lot of hard work that's gone on in the background for years. And just shows that we had a great belief within the group that we could get over the line on Sunday when even things didn't go well for us at times during the year. You know, look at the Caspar game to a certain extent. Shane Scott's goal in the last kick of the game is kind of the right on the stars, as I say, a little bit. So a lot of things aligned well for us, but you have to get your own bit of luck sometimes too, and we deserved every bit of it. Looking
at your record, Westport's record in senior championship finals, 9 finals, 0 wins before the weekend, and on 5 of those finals lost to Ballina. Which is quite extraordinary, and even Ballina with a team that relegated yourselves to the second tier intermediate. So yes. It's a bit of a. Does it make it more special because there's a bit of a thing going on there? There's a bit of a rivalry and plenty of history.
There is, and I think there's going to be for a long time, because if you look at both teams in particular, excuse me, the age profile is huge. They're going to be around for a long time, and they're going to be in plenty more finals. That's going to be the challenge for a lot of us. But thankfully, I'm not that old where I played in any of those finals, so I can't be associated with them. I can only be associated with the one final I played in. So, but yeah, no. Bala are the top tier team in Mayo Championship. They have the most titles. They're the most successful club, and they've dominated for a long time now. Listen, they haven't won in 15 years. That's a new group coming through. So it is a bit of a bittersweet moment. But I think when they relegate us to a certain extent, guys, not to sound in a weird way, but I think it was probably no harm for the group that we had, because I think we needed a full rebrand, rebuild, and I suppose. At the time, we didn't have a lot of guys coming through. It was only myself and Kevin Kane's time that were playing with Mayo. Didn't have a lot of guys there. So we knew what was coming. And that fruit situation came then in 2016, where we won the intermediate and then went on the All-Ireland run as well. So things like that. We've created a lot of history for the club with this current group of guys. But it's not the likes of myself or Brian or Get. It's the core group of lads that have won minor A medals, under 21 A medals. They've really dominated Mayo underage. And now they've really stepped up to the plate for the senior team, and to be honest, that core group, that's all they know is winning, and they're very comfortable in saying that. That's not a confidence thing. That's just they're fully believing what they're doing. And we got Shane Conway back in this year. He would have trained a lot of those guys in West College and school. So listen, as I said, a lot of things aligned really well for us this year, and it was our target to win it. That's everyone's target, is to win senior championship, and to do it as the first team in the club is just brilliant, and I love saying it. It just sounds really well. It sounds great. I keep saying it to myself every morning.
How, was this a long process then, Lee? You see, there's so many people involved behind the scenes in clubs that maybe they wouldn't get certainly the national or sort of wider recognition, where they would say, well, we're going to put a plan in place here, or we're literally going to take the under-12s, we're going to probably themselves a bit frustrated at the lack of success that Westport had.
Yeah, we've been lucky. Again, I'm talking about a core group of guys there. There's 12, 13 lads there that just are all the same age profile. And once they won the under 21A, there was something kind of building from that group. And even when we played the intermediate All-Ireland, the majority of those guys were 18 in even certain schools. So there's no baggage. They're just very hard-working kids who want to come in and be successful, and that's not even saying if they make Mayo grades they're happy, but they're happy to dominate in Mayo and at their age group. So I was going to wait by hook or by crook to play with this group, to be honest, because I had a great feeling that we were going to do something special with them. And my wife kept saying to me, you'd be 40 by the time you start stepping up, and I said no, we're going to do it sooner rather than later. So but it's taken a lot of work. A lot of the thanks, I suppose, like Charlie Lambert, their two sons, his two sons are playing, he's chairman for the last 5 years. He's put a lot of work in the background. Other guys, listen, I'm not going to start naming people because I'll miss people, but there's been a lot of hard work that's gone in the background. And I said something earlier, a lot of people seem to be talking for Westport, but a lot of people are doing their talking internally as groups and putting a lot of structure in place, put a lot of money investment into teams, pitches, and even this year, anything that we needed in terms of support or anything at all, the guys were there to help us. And I mean, that's all we need. But essentially, it's all just about getting the right group of guys in together. We have a panel of 34, I think, so we do. And every night them lads come up to train hard. And this is not just generic saying, they come to work hard. Shane Conway, Martin Conley, and they're as transparent as any manager I've worked with before, is if you're not doing yourself, you will not be playing in the story. I don't care who we are. You need to be doing the right stuff for us, doing the right stuff for the team. And you're always backing the team over yourself. You always make the right decision for the team. And you seem to have a couple of changes through the group. And what I loved about this year is that we're missing probably 2 or 3 of our best players. Colin Moore is one of the best club forwards in Mayo. He was carrying us the last 2 years. Didn't kick the ball this year. Owen McLaughlin only played 1 game this year. Joe Grady did his crucial in the quarterfinal, was one of our best players in championship at that point. So listen, there's been a lot of guys that haven't got to play, unfortunately, but it was never an excuse. It was just get on with the job, and you see what happened, because we just believed that we could do it.
It's kind of a cliched question, obviously, and you haven't won All-Ireland with Mayo, but you've won a lot of big games. How does it compare?
Listen, the club is everything. I don't think it's not apples for apples in any way, because essentially without the club, I don't get to play for Mayo, and that's just the reality of it. So I need to be sure that I'm present with my club as much as I can, and that's hard sometimes because the county season takes over a lot of the year. So it's not the same. It's not the same, and I agree because sometimes Mayo at that stage is where they talked about it, and that's fine. But it's when you go back to the roots of where you grew up and what you did, and the group of guys, like I mentioned Kevin Kane there last night, like he's one of my best mates. Like, so we've trooped through everything from under 12s, 13s, right up to senior, and we had a lot of hard underage years where we didn't win a lot. We won an intermediate in 09, and then again we had a massive gap. We thought we were 18, 19 that time in 09, and we said we're going to win plenty, and it took us to 16 and 17 to do something again, and then again there's another little wait until we got over the line last day. But it's days like the last day that me and Kevin appreciate the most, and I love looking into the families and the relationships in the club that we got to meet after the game, and that's the personal aspect of playing with your club and what it means to people.
I was watching that very emotional interview you did, Lee, after the match at the weekend, and like, I guess for a game where you win by 3 points and there's only a kick of the ball in it until the last minute, you can't relax until that full-time whistle goes. I mean, what went through your head when that full-time whistle went and you realised that you were Mayo senior champions for the first time?
There's always a relief, to be honest, because there's huge pressure. There's always pressure winning the finals. Unfortunately, I'm probably a bit more documented for playing the finals and not getting over the line. So there's always that little bit of bittersweet moment that it's done. But it's funny, I won nearly everything bar Sava Wire, so it's a funny one to say that I haven't won many finals. I won plenty as well. So and I'm proud of that, and I was just proud to be involved with the guys on Sunday. I really was, and it's not a thing where it was Lee Keegan about Westport. I'm just with a group of guys that are pulling their weight, just working like dogs week in, week out, and I just enjoyed that. I loved the whole year, to be honest. It's just been a brilliant crack. It's been a brilliant journey so far. We have another game now Sunday weekend against Cullen, but it just when the whistle goes, it's very hard to sum up, and I still sometimes you get a bit lost words, like, and I was lost words on Sunday because I didn't know how to describe it, to be honest. So you just don't know, and I suppose initially it's always relief because you've done it, but in the last few days and just having chats with the guys and families around and the parishes that were people doing bonfires, then you realise, right, it's not just 50-man or 20-man team. There's a lot more people out there that what it means to them, and I just was delighted that we can say we did it for the people of Westport, and to say that you're the first team to do it, to win a senior medal. And as I said in last day, it's the pinnacle of your club career to win a senior medal, and that's what it means. So that medal is stored nicely in the back pocket now when we get it, and one that will look back in the years to come and enjoy it. But I do think if we want, we have huge opportunities as a club to progress and do more, but that's for another time for talking. But I think the whistle on Sunday was just a roller coaster of emotions. It's sometimes it's very hard to sum up, but the overall feeling was just absolutely delighted to be involved, and I never was happy to hear a final whistle go as quick.
Has it given you, like, because I remember when myself and Jerry last spoke to you in September, it was just after or before the second round of the championship, I think, and you were talking about having, changing priorities in your life, and football had taken centre stage for so long, and now you're obviously, as you say, focusing on the kids and family and everything else, and rightly so. I mean, but has this given you as I guess a renewed sense of vigour? Because you've spoken well before about the young players coming through in Westport and how that, and seeing them progress and come into the first team and get playing championship matches has given you a new sense of enjoyment for the game. So has winning this trophy nearly whetted your appetite for more, or how do you feel after it?
I think there's a coin in that question over there.
We're hoping we get you yesterday morning when you'd be in a really loose state of chat.
When you text me Tuesday, there was no way I was going on Wednesday.
That's fair enough.
I suppose, like I said before, I'm the oldest guy in the team in Westport. That's good. I'm fine with that. But I the satisfaction I get seeing the guys from the intermediate when they're 18 to the guys there now and what they've done and how they developed, and that can, of course, if that doesn't give me appetite to play and want to win more with that group, then there's something wrong with me, because these guys are not waiting for anyone. They're working. They're trying to do the right thing for the club. So if that doesn't give me some kick in the arse to say, well, I need to follow this, and then I'm just worse off than the next person. So yeah, I get the satisfaction I get from playing with those guys is crazy. I just love it. There's just such a buzz. And of course, it gives you an appetite to play more and want to win more, but for the club. And that's the thing I'm talking about. These guys I want to play with for the club, because these guys are doing the stuff for the club. And it'll be a different conversation if I was with Mayo when this had happened. And I'm talking with the younger kids and the other guys. And of course, there's always an appetite there as well. But I'm solely depressed with the group of guys I'm playing at the moment, because that's all that matters for me at the moment, because we're still together. We're still another match in a week and a half. So it'd be very rude of me to be discussing other options or aspects of what's going on out there, rather than just Westport versus Mike Cullen now Sunday week, and what that does, and the celebration that we had last day. So I don't want to take it away from the group just because it should be just about Westport.
Absolutely. I'm sure you're sick of getting asked that question about the
I'm not. No, I'm not.
Like the Mayo, even when Kevin McStay, I'm sure Kevin has spoken to you, but it's probably one of those things where you don't want to focus on it until the club is over. But I'm sure it's still one of those questions you get fairly often.
Yeah, well, I see a text there now. I know I did not. Yeah, well, the decision's going to have to be made eventually, but I like the fact it's put on hold for a while, because I get to play another game at Westport.
Do you feel as good as ever?
I feel good, yeah. I didn't after the game, and I not from celebrations, but I do break down from time to time.
Yeah.
Because the club is as tough as county. I know it's only 60 minutes, but it's rigorous enough. We still train as much as the county. You have your gym sessions. You're still doing 4 or 5 times a week to be trying to be at the peak of your game. And I mentioned last night I wasn't particularly that good on Sunday, but I didn't have to be, because there was enough of the guys that were doing the job for me. So I was delighted. And so, yeah, but in terms of appetite and playing at the peak, I feel as good as ever, to be honest. Yeah, I do. And that comes into, I was reading yesterday Paul Finlay from Ballybay, and he said, once you have all your ducks in a row and things are going well in life, why wouldn't you enjoy it? We're given the opportunity to be playing something we love playing. So, I mean, if I'm happy going into a group playing football, then absolutely. Then of course I love playing. I feel great. Now I still don't feel great today. Now we're back training tonight, which would be fun. But I mean, that's the fun part as well. But in terms of performance, I could never question performance-wise a reason for not playing. It was just other things about it sometimes that you need to just look internally and see where they're at.
The things you'll remember this in 40 years' time, you'll have great memories of going even back to training tonight and smiling on people's faces.
Yeah, we can't wait to get back together. Guys were back doing their bit last night as well. So that's the fun part. We're back together. We're still going. And I'd be very good friends with Pork Swanee, and we were having great chats during the year before we came up with each other, and saying what else would you be at? Where else would you be like? People saying I love the break, but they'd also love to be involved in big days like Sunday. And that's the fun part of life. They don't come around too often. So I mean, the two of us agreed, what else would you be at in the bank holiday Sunday? We're kicking the ball right in the park.
You're going back to Mayo anyway, I think we can say.
I think Porrick Joyce was one of the people.
Sonny gets me in the headlock, I might have him on.
Porrick Joyce was one of the people who paid tribute to you, Lee, I think on Twitter, I think it was at the weekend. He was saying no one is more deserving of a club senior title. I'm sure it's lovely to hear tributes like that.
Porrick is one of my coaches in the Nationals before, so I know Porrick, and he's just a great lad, so I think I have nothing but utmost respect for that. So it's great to hear when your peers give you respect like that, and because they know the work that goes in the scene themselves, and when big days come off the likes of themselves, like I did on Sunday, they know exactly the appreciation, the level of satisfaction that we get from Sunday. Well,
I know Mayo have Galway up in the league, I think, in the first game. So maybe all it takes, Lee, is during the Mike Cullen match, a couple of them Galway County lads rubbing you up the wrong way, and you're like, you know what? I'm gonna go for one more year.
Mike Cullen are some squad lads, I tell you that much.
What are your chances in Connacht, do you think?
I think we're going to give it a right crack. We're going to give it a right go, guys. So there's no reason why we wouldn't. We've been on kind of runs in intermediate before, and we know the satisfaction levels of getting the job done. So, we're delighted with the test run we have Sunday week. We're running as big underdogs again, which is fine. So yeah, we're to be honest, as a group, we haven't overly discussed it, obviously, because celebrating. I'm sure my Cullen are probably a bit the same. Get back there tonight and start analysing a bit. And listen, Michael don't need much analysing. They're just a quality outfit. I think they have 6 older players straight away. You can name off the top of your tongue. So 2 championships in 3 years speaks volumes for their club and what they've done as a small parish. So we actually can't wait for the test, to be honest, because they're the teams that you really want to see or measure up against, see where you're at outside your own county. So we know we're going to be underdogs into that game, no doubt, but we have full belief that we can get the job done if we get things right again. So it'll be a cracking game, I hope. couple of the Kelly lads now and a couple of our lads now matching up. There's some tasty individual battles to look at there straight away. So
can't wait. Listen, Lee, huge congratulations again on the weekend, and very best of luck in the remainder of the Connacht Championship, however long you go.
Thanks a million, guys. I appreciate it.
Great stuff as always. Lee Keegan there, Westport star and Mayo star as well.
He's copped on this media game. Like he was asked to come on yesterday.
He's great.
Just say you will, and then deal with doing it or not doing it later, and then like, oh geez, maybe I need another day here, and I'm back training tonight, and he sounds fresh again.
I understand, and I listened to Lee after the weekend, and like he was asked about the Mayo question as well, and he said, I genuinely haven't decided, and I haven't considered it, because all I'm thinking about is the club, and I kind of admire and respect that. Like if back of your head you're thinking, am I going again for next year? He has loads of time to decide.
Totally.
So I mean, play your club championship and play the Moy Cullen game, and if you get over that, just concentrate on week by week. And
it's only 5 times a week with the club. Like it's just
mad, isn't it?
The commitment these lads have, it's incredible. And club level, and then I wasn't aware up until the weekend that Westport hadn't won something. I mean, if Lee Keegan went through his career without winning either an All-Ireland or a county with his club, like, and you talk about Chilwell, and Lee Keegan is blessed to be as one of the best footballers of his generation, one of the best defenders probably in the game we've seen. But at the same time, at the level of Gaelic games and the amateur commitment and the amount of work that they gave, that he's so worthy of it. And
he's going to be one of the best players of this. Like, he's 5 All-Stars.
Yeah,
and
5 All-Stars.
I mean, which is just, it sums it up.
And I think defines that Mayo kind of, history is written by the winners, but Mayo gave so many good performances and so many valiant performances against exceptional football teams, losing by a point, getting the replays, and he defined that spirit, I think, and this, like, no lack of belief in Lee Keegan whenever he went onto the pitch in Croke Park.
Unbelievable. And I love chatting to Lee because he's refreshingly open and honest. Like he's not trying to Asher look it. He thinks about his answers.
Yeah, he has that kind of cool West of Ireland accent as well. You can tell Westport is like it's like the Dublin 4 of sort of Mayo anyway. Really cool spot, very touristy near the Atlantic Ocean. Lovely part town. English design, actually, one of those kind of design towns probably back in the 18th century. Really slick looking town, really vibrant. Matt Malloy's, as I mentioned, and you can tell he's like, that was probably a slur at them. Asher, the townies, like, you never win anything. The way like a lot of the rural clubs do better than the
100%. Same in Monaghan.
Naas were playing Crokes the weekend, and Naas would have been massively underachievers in Kildare, and now it's but it's funny, like a lot of the, like, even at home I can see like Roscommon wouldn't have necessarily been the football team, soccer team that we thought they would have been, and they would have been superior rural teams. It's so strange. Like this is the case in Rural Ireland.
We're the same. I said recently on the show as well, the 2 teams relegated from the Monaghan Senior Championship this year were Carrickmacross and Castleblaney, 2 of the biggest towns, and my own club, Monaghan Harps, which is the Monaghan Town team, kicking the ball away from getting relegated from intermediate. So
mad, like,
just mad. The rural teams punching them up.
But I've done a few accents there as well.
Absolutely. We'll stay away from the South Monaghan accent for the rest of the show. I might do it one more time, so stay tuned.
Just towards the end.
13 minutes past 8 on this Thursday morning. OTB AM brought to you with Gillette in association with Movember. Effortless shave, magnificent Mo. You can sign up or donate now at Movember.com. Up next, more club greatness and enjoyable celebrations as well for everyone down in Nemo Rangers in Cork. Luke Connolly will be with us back after this.
OTB AM. This is OTB Sports Radio.
The Koigig Pod on OTB Sports.
I'm laughing because I was listening to a conversation that the City girls were having, and they were just going on about this throw-in, and I was like, yeah, that's our weapon in the World Cup.
It's so great for the league that once again we're in this position.
I was watching PSG, I wasn't overly impressed with them either.
Keep up to date with all the WSL action every Tuesday and subscribe to the feed in the OTB Sports app now. OTB AM with Gillette in association with Movember. Effortless shave, magnificent Mo.
14 minutes past 8 on this Thursday morning on OTB AM with myself, Shane Hannon, and Johnny Ward. Delighted to say a very good morning to the Nemo Rangers senior football captain, Luke Connolly. Morning, Luke. How are things?
Morning, gents. How are you? Well, thank you.
Keeping well. We were just chatting to Lee Keegan there. Westport's first ever senior championship title in Mayo, and he's still recovering from the celebrations. You're for yourselves 5th county title in 8 years for Nemo Rangers at the weekend. 116-2-9 win against St Finbarrs. regardless of how many you've won, Luke, I'm sure each one is all the more special.
Yeah, look, that's probably a club ethos as well. But the next one is the most important one. But I certainly won't tire of winning a county medal anyway. And I hope there's many more to come. But look, we treat everyone as special. I would imagine Lee treats his one fairly special. I think is their first in 9 maybe. So look, we're not naive or oblivious to the fact that it's not an easy thing to win a county. So we're certainly not going to lose the joy of winning one.
How were the celebrations for yourselves down in Nemo?
They're good. I'm glad he asked to speak to me this morning, because I think my voice on Tuesday morning wasn't working. So,
Lee was the same funny.
I've had a day now to recover. So no, look, it was fabulous. We won a delayed county final, kind of on the tail end of COVID. So it was very subdued. So I think it was there was a serious release of joy and emotion in the club, and a lot of people were able to experience it together. So it felt fairly significant.
You found your parents at the full-time whistle, Luke. Like the community feel and seeing people I mean, that must have been quite an overwhelming emotion.
It was, and to be honest, I think it did actually overwhelm me for a brief period. Look, everything that happened this year with the way the year was falling, centenary year, being captain. As I said in an interview, I pride myself on being calm and not letting anything affect me. But I think when I found my father, it was a bit of a mess for a couple of seconds, but I pulled it together, thankfully. But no, look, as I said, for some reason this year it just felt significant. It just felt like an outpouring of emotion, and look, just fabulous to see the crowds that we were able to go out there, and there's so much black and green on the pitch.
What is the club county contrast like? We kind of spoke to Lee about this, and you do hear it year and year again, like that. These are the lads you grew up with.
Like there's fellas there I played with. Like I can think already of 6 lads I played with since I was 4 years of age. Lads I've been in school with, lads that I mean, the other side of it too is like growing up watching some of these players like Paul Kerrigan. Some of our management team, Garrod O'Shea. I remember Garrod O'Shea coming into school with the cups and chairing these lads, and now I'm working with them or playing with them. And as I said, look, I'd imagine every other player talking about their club, it's that sense of community. It's those fellas you've grown up with and played with all your life, as opposed to county. Don't get me wrong, it's fabulous. You play with great players, but there's just that sense of, I don't know, it just means more when it's within your club colours. You
mentioned Paul Kerrigan as well. Like, it must be so special for him. I know he's not like necessarily going to be lasting 70 minutes now or whatever, but at this stage of his career.
Yeah, and I mean, I hope he doesn't mind me saying it, but he did say to a few lads after the game it was probably his favourite county. And look, obviously, there was a bit of that shock when he was left out of the team in the semi-final, I think it was. But I mean, look, Paul is a professional, always has been. The way he's carried himself and the influence he's had when he has come on has been huge. And it's small stuff that goes unnoticed. I think I rewatched the game. And there's 2 short free kicks that he wins that, at a late stage in the game, not many fellas are running to get the ball when they're under that much pressure. So, look, he's the utmost professional, but I mean, it's hard not to admire the guy.
The management team, that must be like, it must take balls and kind of, you must have trust in them to know that they're doing this for the right reason as well. It's like just preserve his legs for the second half, more or less.
Huge. Look, I mean, at the other side of it too, it was a massively brave call, but I suppose you got to appreciate what the management team done. The other side of it too is, look, you have to give a shout out to the likes of Luke Horgan and Rowan Dalton, who were 2 players who, put their hands up the past couple of weeks and how they performed and made that decision. So, as much as you can praise the management, full credit has to go to the lads who, forced their way into a team, which you don't really see in a run like this. Usually the 15 is set. You always hear that kind of cliche, look, there's places up for grabs, but I don't know, many fellas believe that, when you're sitting on the bench for many games. But look, full credit to both management and the lads, but I think most credit has to go to Paul and the way he handled himself, and how he's brought those lads on.
Strikes me, Luke, and I'm just thinking here of the famous clip of John O'Mahony in the A Year Till Sunday documentary, where he has the newspapers up on the dressing room wall and the fancy dans and all this. for a team that's so successful, Nemo, in recent years, you were fairly criticised coming into the final. I know that's something that kind of maybe stuck in the craw of yourself and a few of the players, and maybe that was based on a quarter-final performance this year. But was that the motivation? Was it to prove people wrong? Do you feel like the team was maybe disrespected this year?
I suppose I don't want to get too carried away with that either. I suppose some of the interviews we done straight after the game, there was probably a bit of raw emotion leading into us really leaning on the whole being criticised. No, look, we were criticised, and don't get me wrong, in the quarter-final we didn't play well. The group game against Clan was probably a different scenario where we were already qualified, and I suppose they were looking to avoid being dragged into relegation battles. So it was kind of a different mindset. But yeah, look, the other side of it too is for me personally, I felt that the group itself was probably a little bit disrespected. And that, look, I'm talking more about the collective than individual players. You've got, if you don't mind me going through a few lads, like you've got Conor Horgan, who was a county final man of the match in 2015, is still putting out fabulous performances for us, and has had back-to-back, I think, 3 in the semi-final, 1-3 in the final, and probably should have got man of the match given the goal he got. You've got the likes of Jack Horgan, again, I think he was man of the match in the 2017 county final, is still putting out brilliant performance for us. So we just felt that as a group, there's a lot of lads in this panel who've achieved a lot and have done a lot for this club, and we just felt that they were being written off based on that performance, and it was a kind of everything that went before that was forgotten, we'll say.
Like, it strikes me, and like I spoke about motivation and trying to get yourself motivated when you're a team that's so successful. There's a great quote here. Excuse me, Luke. There's a great quote here from club legend Jim Cremin, late club legend down in Nemo, before he passed away. The most important player to play for Nemo hasn't been born yet, and it's up to the senior team to keep that fire burning. Like, it's a great quote, and it's a great way of looking at it. Like, that the best days are ahead of you, kind of thing.
Yeah, and to be honest, look, obviously the late great Jim Cremin, there's so much stuff you can say about the man, but I just remember, particularly after the 2020 the late county final, it was Paul Kerrigan. It seemed to be always talking about Paul up smart. It was Paul Kerrigan who actually said it, and it just stuck with me since, and I think it kind of encapsulates the ethos of the club. And what it means to play for Nemo Rangers, and I suppose it encapsulates how we feel about the club as well. It was actually a former teammate and a club member. I remember after the semi-final, and it was something again like this that he said to me that stuck with me, is that after we won, I think a few lads went over to some of the young kids who had come all the way down, and just small stuff, gave him a high five. And he said, you actually don't understand how important those kind of small things is, as opposed to result. And the way he clarified is, he asked me, what's your first memory of a county final with Nemo, or going to one? And I said, I remember going to see, I don't even remember the year, I think Nemo played Bishopstown in a county final. I was a kid, I think we went to school, and I couldn't tell you the result. I couldn't tell you who played. I couldn't tell you whether, Nemo did win, as far as I remember, but I couldn't tell you anything about the game. But I could remember, I think, was it Colin came over, and I know he waved a couple of the kids in the stand, and that's the memory I have of that county final. So it was only when he said that to me, I kind of said, you know what? Yes, love winning. It's great for us, but in the grander scheme of things, it's much bigger than us. Days like that.
Like, when you celebrated, it was your 30th yesterday as well, was it?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, thanks.
Jesus, happy birthday!
There we go. Yeah, bring them on after. Yeah. Any excuse for another party, like. So you're on one level, at one level you're celebrating, but like, you've commercials coming up, and I'm just looking at it. You're only 14 shorter than you in the betting for the All Ireland, so including Kilcoo, who are actually fourth favourites despite being champions. It just shows the depth. So you've Crokes, Mike Cullen, Glen, and then this didn't even mention the likes of Naas and Westport and so on. Like, you're celebrating, but are you at the other level thinking we could go on to something really great here?
Yeah, look, I'll be straight up. We're not going to hide away from the fact that when you look, if you win your county, everyone dreams big. It's as simple as that. We were, we got there in 2017. Unfortunately, we came up against, Carfin, in probably one of the best club teams that's been around for quite some time. 2019 again, I think we got to a semi-final again against Carfin. Probably didn't lay a glove on them that day either. But the other side of it too is that we know, look, Carmel are serious outfit. They will be gunning for us after the Munster final in 2019. But I mean, look, every team that wins the county and goes out is going to dare to dream. Let's be straight up about it. We're not going to hide away from that. You know, you're 5 games? If you win 5 games, you're an All-Ireland champion. So, as much as we're not going to get too carried away with it, I mean, look, you're not naive enough to believe that people aren't having that conversation in the group. But the other side, as you said, I mean, it's an absolute minefield when you do come out of your county. Winning Munster alone will be a huge task. So, I mean, you've got the Clonmels, the Newcastle West. I mean, these are really good teams. Like,
just finally for me, where are you with Cork at the moment?
Look, that's a conversation that I hope to have with Northern Ireland club in my back pocket. But yeah, look,
Did you hear Lee Keegan now? You can just say what he said, basically.
Yeah, he actually, if you could just kind of cut what he said on top of me as well, I think that would be a good way of doing it. Yeah.
He said he's going to get another 10 years.
Well, look, physically, I'd feel great, but yeah, look, there's a few people I'd have to have a conversation with, but yeah, look, that's something I'll address. I don't want it to sound like it's some huge thing. I might even get a phone call, to be honest. You never know. So, yeah, we'll deal with that as it comes.
Watch this space. Look, finally for me, I mean, Megan qualifying for the World Cup. She's taken all the shine off you as well. But
I got my 2 days.
You got your 2 days,
and the 30th,
and the 30th birthday as well. Yeah.
So.
What was that like? As a brother to be watching that. I know you're trying to keep updates on your phone probably for that Scotland match, but and now you have a World Cup to look forward to as a family. I'm sure you'll head over next year.
Yeah, look, I mean, first and foremost, it's just incredible. I think the term I used in a few interviews was bizarre, but I think it doesn't even grasp the magnitude of, you know, she's preparing for World Cup. We're having a conversation about, you know, one of the biggest accomplishments you can have in a career. And yeah, I think what was special is the fact that we got to share it with her. Now, obviously, she would prefer to have been on the pitch that night. But no, look, it's fabulous. The father has his flights booked as is, so we'll be following fairly soon. An incredible achievement and one that we can't wait to experience and soak in. You know, I mean, if you'd ask for your opening game at a World Cup, what it would be, I suppose, playing the host the first night is as good as you can get, really. And obviously, with the Irish contingent that is in Australia, you might get a fairly substantial green crowd over there. So, look, for her now, I think it's just about getting through the club season now, getting back fit, and trying to get her the best out of Brighton, and hopefully go into the World Cup in good form.
Yeah, I remember watching a lot of people have World Cup memories as a kid. I remember watching 02, the TV getting rolled into the classroms. Like,
that's
it. Yeah, the big TV on wheels. Yeah, I think I remember I watched the Saudi Arabia game in school. But my mother, in her wisdom, said I was sick for the Germany game and pulled me out.
Could you play a bit of ball? Could you?
I could. Look, anyone who probably listens wouldn't say it. I probably thought I was better than what I was. But the problem for me is when I got better at soccer was actually because of playing senior football. So when I went back playing at kind of 19, 20, I was a bit braver, we'll say, is probably the better term. But I could play. No, look, I wasn't Megan, don't get me wrong. But yeah, in my own head, I thought I could play.
Colin Healy will be on the line anyway.
Still time.
Yeah. Well, look, you know, there's still time. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, absolutely. Listen, Luke, great stuff as always. Huge congrats again to yourself and the Nemo lads last weekend. Best luck against the Clonmel commercials as well. And
appreciate it.
We'll check in again soon, no doubt.
Cheers.
Thank you very much.
Luke Connolly there, Nemo Rangers and Cork footballer. Good guy as well.
Good guy,
yeah, and that's going to be so bizarre watching your sister playing a World Cup. I
can only imagine when you think about
for
it,
a family just to watch one of your siblings or daughter or son or whoever.
It's so intangible for the men's senior team, you think, at the moment to get there, and it's going to be some hype, and to see your sister. Just imagine being, thought about this, imagine being like a dad or a mother of a really successful, like, sporting family.
Yeah.
Like, it must be And then so much is made of how the parenting influenced the development of the kid on the pitch, because there's that, you know, that father who's constantly giving out, there's that father who's constantly giving encouragement, there's the father in between and the mother in between, and there's the parents who just don't go to the games at all. And do you know what I mean? I think that's so important in one's development as well, that, you know, the parents give the right advice, and obviously genetics seem to help.
Well,
they certainly help the Connollys.
The Connollys are doing all right.
Yeah, as are the Hannons, to be fair. I mean, we'll get to that again.
Johnny, we'll get to that again.
Their accents and everything.
Yeah, we're not going to the World Cup now, mind you, or winning county championships, but we're trying our best.
Well, a Cork Jazz Fest.
Yeah, fair. 8:30 on this Thursday morning, OTB AM, brought to you with Gillette in association with Movember. Effortless shave, magnificent Mo. You can sign up or donate now at Movember.com. Now, it's time for Johnny to tell us why you had to be there.
It's so unexpected.
It's one of those you had to be there moments.
You had to be there.
It subsequently genuinely did change everything about my life.
You had to be there.
Yeah, that's the latest episode of You Had to Be There here on OTB AM. And Johnny, I can't wait for this. We're gonna go in order of, I guess, chronological when this happened. So we'll start with 2001. And a man that lives long in the memories, and as a player and still as a manager with Galway, Pádraig Joyce.
Yeah, it's lovely to see that. It's lovely to see him referenced again this morning by Lee Keegan. And you know, so many great players, I suppose, don't make managers, but like, I think what Galway achieved this year, and again, history is written by the winners, but Galway were winners this year in many respects, to get to an All-Ireland final and to produce that performance, which I'll again get to later on in the little clip. But so 1998 was kind of I was doing my junior cert, and I don't know what it was, because like I suppose my upbringing with Galway, watching Galway footballers and the hurlers, was like constant failure. But the hurlers were kind of, because of the makeup of, you know, the championship, the hurlers at that stage, they were never that far off. Whereas with the footballers, like you're thinking the Hammers of Mayo got, and then Galway kind of coming as a something of a force in the mid-90s and winning it in 98. And in 98 it felt like there was something special about the feeling in the county. And as a teenager, maybe you're romanticising it now, but there was something special about it. And it was because of players like Pádraig Joyce and Michael Donlan from the Dunmore club, from your dad's club, and I don't know, John O'Mahony came in, and it was special. Subsequently, obviously, the next couple of years they came unstuck, and then the back door came in 2001, and we'll be talking to a man with strong affinity for Wicklow. I think Galway started off in Ockram in 2001, if I remember rightly, and it culminated anyway in a final against Meath, in which they were sort of struggling in the first half, and then Pádraig Joyce just got 10 points. And Pádraig just got 10 points. And I remember, like,
just the 10 points.
Jesus, it was like left and right. And I mean, we spoke about this earlier with Colm. You do look back in games, and I did look back in this game. I bought it as one of these last ditch, like, Hail Mary DVDs for my brother as a Christmas gift, you know, when you should have put more thought into it a few years ago, and watched it back, and I was like, yeah, that wasn't quite as good a game as I remember, whereas 98 was actually amazing, and Galway and Kildare in 98 was an amazing game. But Pádraig Joyce get 10 points. I think Meath got 8. Pádraig Joyce got
17 points to 8, yeah.
17 points to 8. So you're like, he was an unbelievable footballer. Like, and the Joyces in general, what a family, what a bunch of characters. Like, love the horses, love football, real, like, quintessential Northeast Galway men, I think. And his talent, and it was amazing to see him make that step into management, because you got to remember, like, there would have been a lot of probably criticism of Pádraig Joyce coming in off Kevin Walsh, who himself was a county legend, and it was very, very hard for Galway, I think, to make the transition to a defensive game, like it was for a lot of teams, but it didn't really work in Galway. And then to try this year to go back to sort of the roots of maybe the 98, 2001 and our old style of football, and that day Pádraig Joyce was amazing. And I do recall, I've said this a few times since, reading the Irish Independent the following morning, and they're like, whoever wrote the article, like, Galway are basically going to dominate Gaelic football for quite some time now. And Galway didn't win a game in Croke Park for another like 17 years or something.
Didn't count on the Ulster teams, Armagh and Tyrone kind of came through then, and Kerry, of course, were there always.
And I think as well that you know, I think Galway were inspired by Mayo's failures in 98, but Mayo were getting so close, and I think, you know, Galway maybe then inspired other teams, but it was very, very... Galway never really recovered maybe from losing Kevin Walsh to an extent, and obviously when Pádraig Joyce himself then got old and the likes of Jeff Fallon, that was a golden team, but that was amazing. I was on the canal end that day, and it just became... It wasn't like 98 in the sense that it just became a procession, but Pádraig Joyce's performance, I was right behind the goal for his... whatever point, he must have gotten 8 points in the second half or something like that. And we just felt like from this, you know, sense of being such a downtrodden county, now all of a sudden Galway were on top of the world, and we had amazing footballers, and he was probably the best of them.
Yeah, 10 points and 9 came in the second half, apparently, for Joyce.
Meath fell apart. Like, I think he might have been even marking Darren Fay. I trying to remember back now, but like Meath had hammered Kerry in the semi, and they were well fancied, like. And Galway were obviously coming. Galway were the first backdoor team to win it, but Pádraig as well. Just
they beat Kerry 2-14 to 5 points. In the semi.
And it was kind of, I do remember 98, Galway were heavy underdogs because Kildare had all the hype that year, and Galway had only beaten sort of Derry or whatever in the semi, but there was this massive faith in the county. But like, I think it was fitting for John O'Mahony that we came back and won it again, and Galway were a long time in the doldrums. It's funny what you think of when Pádraig Joyce hit the 10th point that day. We were already going to the bar and celebrating and thinking of next year. Galway wouldn't do anything for a long time after that, and it'd be beautiful if Pádraig Joyce could be the link between the next All-Ireland, because I got an unbelievable kick out of the All-Ireland final this year, even though they lost.
Yeah, and we'll get to that one, as you said. Like, but if you look at that Meath team that day, Trevor Giles captain, you had Graham Garrity, you had Nigel Crawford, Darren Fay, as you mentioned. But the Galway team, Alan Keenan goals, full-back line, Kieran Fitzgerald, Gary Fahey captain, Richard Fahey, half-back line, Declan Meehan, Tomas Mannion, Sean DePuer, Kevin Walsh and Michael Donnellan in midfield.
Almost all playing in 98, like bar Richie Fahey maybe.
Yeah. The half-forward line is Paul Clancy, Jaff Fallon and Joe Bergen. And then the full-forward line, Derek Savage, Pádraig Joyce, Tommy Joyce, Alan Cairns and Kieran Comer came on. But what a team.
Yeah, what a team. And, you know, it's funny, that team then would probably have run aground in the sort of the defensive system that's followed. And I think that, like, this is, Galway people talk about, like, Galway have this kind of, you know, natural style of football, but it's more or less true. It mightn't be like to say that Kerry's basically a football county. Galway's a lot going on, but Galway's style of football is true to the spirit of the game. And I think there was a strange disassociation between the way the footballers were going and traditional GA men who couldn't really watch this anymore, and that evaporated last year, like completely gone. And you know, you see, I'll nicely kind of bookend this by going back to the final next year and another performance that was arguably better again than Pádraig Joyce's, but it's beautiful to watch when it's played well, and that day Pádraig Joyce was probably next to unmarkable.
Yeah, and I think a lot of players, even current players, we had Shane Cunningham, the Kilmacud Crooks captain, on recently, and he was talking about his dad was from Galway and Pádraig Joyce was his hero growing up. I'd love to know how many footballers around the country at the minute were inspired by Pádraig Joyce, because that wonderful left foot, I'm sure he's inspired plenty of players. So that's Pádraig Joyce, 2001 final. Your second pick, Johnny, March 16th 2002, so over 20 years ago now, but Galway United 2, Derry City 3, the Derry legend Liam Coyle.
Yeah, I was trying to bring 5 different sports. I think when we'd Vinnie Perth on, which is the morning I was on for this, I think he may have done 5 different sports. There's Liam Coyle, and this game was in Terryland Park, which is probably my favourite ground in the world, really, because it was just my love of Galway United and just what that place means to, you know, a League of Ireland fan in Galway. But I like a lot of these, I got into Galway United in 97, so this was 5 years later, and a lot of your memories, there was one I was thinking of going for. It was a goal by Bobby Ryan in Belfield, and probably in front of maybe 100 people, where I think it was Barry Ryan who was in goal for UCD. He kind of made a bit of a hatch for his clearance, and Bobby Ryan with like a half volley from maybe 45 yards just found the top corner. And those of us who were there, we still speak about this goal. And I was doing a piece in the match programme.
It's like Woodstock.
Yeah.
You were there, you weren't.
And it was like, I was doing a piece with Bobby Ryan, like kind of a nostalgic piece, and I was like, oh, by the way, like I had to bring up that goal in Belfield. He couldn't even remember it.
No way.
He scored this absolute worldly, like unbelievable goal that would, like, if a Brazilian scored it, yada yada. He couldn't even remember it, and I was like, Jesus, like, I mean, I was such a limited footballer, and I if I got a goal like that in training, anyway, so he couldn't remember it, so I was going to put that in, but instead I went for Liam Coyle just because I thought he was a good example of the type of player that in the League of Ireland in those days, you get these incredible talents that for some reason weren't playing at a higher level. Tony Sheridan was absolutely gifted. He played for Coventry, so he did briefly play at a high level, but found his niche back home. There are players like that. Liam Coyle was one because of injuries. Like, Liam Coyle would have been a top player, I think, in England, but because of injuries, he couldn't. But that day in Galway, and I had to think back, Galway United actually got relegated that season, and Monaghan United finished last. Galway United, Dundalk and Monaghan United got relegated. Derry City were not out of the relegation problems themselves, but it was 2-2. Galway United went up the pitch to get what looked like the winner in a massive game. Liam Coyle, who could barely run at this stage, was like probably about 34, basically did this mazy run, took on 3 or 4 Galway United players, couldn't run because of his knees, and curled it into the top corner, and some of the Galway United fans would start to clap. It's like, you were absolute genius. And like, I had the pleasure of being in the old Brandywell watching Liam Coyle walk around the pitch and just run games, and what a talent. What
type of player was he?
You see, he was the type of player he was because he couldn't move. So it was like, it's like we're talking about the lads playing Astro, who like, they're just so far ahead of you that they don't move, but they have a touch. Like, he was a goal scorer, but he was also like, he was part of that Derry City revival when they came into the League of Ireland. But I forget the injury he had, but it was a serious career-ending type injury, and he became a goal scorer like a number 10. Didn't move that much because he couldn't. Amazing touch. Like Van
Nistelrooy, like the touch, not very mobile, or like a finisher.
Like, Van Nistelrooy was like a Ferrari compared to him being a tractor. Like, he really could not move very well at all. Like, his mobility was bad. And I would have
agricultural footballer. Yeah.
I would have seen him later on in his life, but his touch and vision, and just like, you could just see. And I remember watching him in Lansdowne Road in a little pre-season friendly in the late 90s where he was playing Newcastle. And even at that level, you could see he's totally in his zone here. And any Derry City fan listening in, or League of Ireland fan of that genre, will know exactly what I'm talking about. Like, one of the greatest talents I've ever seen in the League of Ireland, and still heavily involved, I think, in the Maiden City as well. And what a player! It was one of those moments where you're absolutely gutted as a fan, but at the same time you're kind of like, you see some of those old goal of the month Matt Letizier's where he got that goal against Blackburn, and you just see a few people behind the goal.
It's like I was at when Monaghan played Kerry in Super 8 and David Clifford scored the last minute goal, and I was gutted, but you're like, okay, yeah, fair enough.
What do you do? I'm watching greatness here. You know?
You nearly, even though it's against your team, you kind of have to appreciate it. He made a Northern Irish cap, Liam Coyle, as well, I think.
Scored an FAI Cup final winner in Tolka around that time, and he would have played until he finished up he only finished up the following season. So I was lucky enough to see him. He'd been 2 spells at Derry City at that stage, 3 spells at Derry City, 4 spells at Derry City if Wikipedia is right, but 100% would have gone,
which it always is, right, of course.
Yeah, would have played in the old English First Division, no doubt whatsoever. He was that talented.
Yeah, fair play. Liam Coyle in the books as your second pick on You Had to Be There, Johnny. We're going to number 3 now. This
is a little bit different.
It's a little bit different, but nobody will be surprised to see that there's a racing pick in there. 2012 at York, the Juddmount, wasn't it? Frankel.
Yeah, there he is. Look at him. He's a beautiful horse, in fairness. So Galileo would have had like the beauty of horse racing, which is kind of
how do you differentiate between a beautiful horse? So if a different horse popped up there that wasn't so beautiful, like what makes a beautiful horse?
I'd be a terrible judge. So like, I mean, I'm working.
Is it the white part on the?
He'd physically, and in fairness, Galileo would have like the white kind of stripe, and that's he's put that in a lot of his stock. And the one thing about racing that's quite unique that I love about it compared to, like, you know, field sports, is that I remember his father, I remember his mother. You're exactly like your father. And I remember like Galileo, and Galileo spawned Frankel. Galileo passed away recently, and Frankel is now the main stallion pretty much. But Frankel was a little bit like, as Aidan O'Brien said, was a little bit off his mind. He was a little bit like hot, and his stock are still showing that. But Pat Healy, the photographer, he basically nearly threw me out of the press room in Mallow the other day for suggesting that Frankel might be better than See the Stars, because I saw See the Stars winning in Leopardstown, I saw him winning the Arc, and that would have been a close second. But when Frankel won that day, I'm going back now,
by 7 lengths.
7 lengths. So this was I suppose the main reason I put this in was this was the only time I saw Frankel, and he was stepping up to an extended mile and 2, having been running all his races were over a mile or less, and he was
10 furlongs for the first time.
Yeah, and he was sent off 1 to 10. Like, you know, so, I mean, to have that sort of a bet about a horse that's, like, clearly amazing, but, like, stepping up in trip. And St. Nicholas Abbey, I remember I backed St. Nicholas Abbey to finish second to him or to finish in the first two or something. And St. Nicholas Abbey was an amazing horse, won the Breeders' Cup, had a kind of a sad death himself. Frankel went by him as if, like, honestly, as if he was just a statue, and won by 7 lengths. I'm just looking at the ratings here. It was given as his joint best ever performance. The other one was when he won at Ascot when he beat Acceleration, and then he went on and won at Ascot. So he ran 14 times, won 14 times, and I have to say he was probably the best horse I've ever seen. Like, See the Stars kept doing it and did it over different trips. Maybe he was better than him, but See the Stars would never win really like that. So you're kind of, it's a little bit apples and oranges. But now I go racing, and Frankel himself had the winner of the Arc this year in Alpinista, so that continuation is one of the beauties of racing. And today in Thurles I'll go in and I'll remember the dad of such a horse winning or something like that, and Frankel is still to me the best ever. And York was a great night out as well, by the way. Jesus, right? Great city, yeah. You know, medieval kind of city. Yeah, really, really cool, and a lot of Irish over there that day. And English racing is kind of struggling to get attendances now, but there was no struggle that day. So Frankel, 2012, Juddmonte, the greatest horse Johnny Ward has ever seen. Number 3 in the books of YHtBT there. The next one, Johnny, as a Galway man, another special one for you. 2017 All-Ireland Senior Hurling Championship semi-final. Everyone will remember this for Joe Canning's moment on the touchline. Tipperary against Galway. Yeah, there are so many examples of Joe you could have picked out. I seem to remember watching his championship debut against Cork when he single-handedly nearly won the game. I think that was his championship debut. I seem to recall watching that in a bar in Dublin, so I wasn't there, and Joe did have better performances than this. But I'm from a football part of Galway, effectively. Ballygar Hurling Club is my local club, and it's making great strides. But a lot of the exponents of hurling in the area would have been like blow-ins from like the likes of, say, Kiltormer or Tipperary. I'm thinking of the Harkins and the Lynches. But the Lynches, Damien Lynch was effectively my best friend when I was in national school. Damien Lynch's dad was Joe Canning's uncle. Right. So Damien and Niall, of course, were very good at hurling, because PJ was from, I think, Kiltormer. So we had always this talk about the Cannings. Then I started watching Ollie play, and like, Ollie was my favourite hurler. Like, he ended up playing cornerback, but he could have played anywhere. The most amazing stick work. So unlucky not to win a senior county All-Ireland. But then this lad Joe comes along, and you're like, you know, in terms of sporting tragedies, if Joe doesn't win an All-Ireland, like, this would be an absolute tragedy. And they went into that game against Waterford in 2017 where, you know, they gave away 2 sloppy goals, and you're like, is this going to happen all over again? That was probably the most emotional I've ever been after a sporting event, because really, I was just like, the hardship of watching Galway coming so close. And in 2012, when it started out, I think when we hammered Kilkenny in the Leinster final, and Anthony Cunningham brought this level of professionalism, I think that culminated then in Micheál Donoghue taking them there. And you remember Micheál Donoghue meeting his dad crossing the bridge, like that sort of stuff where, you know, there's just so much going on in a picture, not to mind the scene itself. But Joe Canning, like, as I said, I was useless at hurling, like absolutely useless at golf, useless with a stick in my hand, but I loved hurling, still love hurling. And that day I was watching, I remember I was wearing like these shades, and my shades fell down into the next tier, like when Joe got that point. And that point, like, I had a terrible view of it. I was basically in the Hogan, and I had an awful view of it. But when Joe got the ball that day and he looked up, and you're like, this is a total 100-1 Hail Mary, but he's probably going to get it. And you see him, and just the noise in the place and the emotion. You forget then that Bubbles went down the other end and had a probably more strikeable, but off his left, I think, that went wide. And meanwhile, my shades were still down in the bottom tier, like they were down the tier below me. I wasn't asking, and then everyone was celebrating afterwards. And I threw my program down at this lad, trying to aim it at his head. By the way, you see those pair of Purcell or whatever? You wouldn't mind like throwing them up to me, and he did. But oh my God, that was like. There's some days you come off a pitch and even watching hurling, and you're just like, you're not right after it. That was one of them. Johnny's Ray-Bans in the Hogan stand. Purcell, actually, and I lost them subsequently as well. Ah, no way. Sorry, Johnny. Sorry, Joe. 5 minutes into stoppage time. I mean, and you talk with a photo with Micheál Donoghue and his father, but photo of Joe as well. Photo of Joe. I mean, and I think one sports file, photo of the year maybe. He's like. It was probably early enough into the shot, because the player knows himself if it's going over or not fairly early. It's just pure
the biggest, widest smile you'll ever see on a player on a pitch, and he knows well before anyone that this is going straight over the black spot.
And Tip played an unbelievable role that day in a game that literally was going either way. And you're talking about fine margins. Tip win that day, maybe Galway would still be having not won All Ireland Championship. But like where Yates speaks about like how can you tell the dancer from the dance? Like when Joe has a hurl in his hand. And when I watch Joe and he'd collect the ball, just look, and this fluidity of motion and fluency of everything that he did, just the most gifted natural hurler. Where he is in the pantheon of the greats with TJ and DJ and Henry, who's now our manager, obviously, and even Christy Ring, if you want to go back that far. I don't know. There may not be a correct answer, but I'll never watch a hurler and get the same feeling as I did as watching Joe Canning, and we could have done with him in the second half against Limerick last year. This year.
So Galway 22 points, Tip 118, the All-Ireland semi-final of 2017, and Joe Canning's great point 5 minutes into stoppage time. That's Johnny's fourth pick on You Had to Be There. Final one, Johnny, another one special for you tribesmen and women. All-Ireland football final of this year. I was at the game myself with my dad, a Galway man. Kerry Galway.
But like, what was your perspective when you're watching like the two sharpshooters of that?
Walsh was even. I had Gavin White sitting in that seat you're in on Saturday. One of the Kerry defenders in the day, All-Star, and he just said he was unplayable. Like the Kerry lads were looking around each other going. Like he said at one point that when he kicked one of the scores in the second half from the sideline, he was just like, what are you supposed to do? Because the defenders were doing everything right. They were pushing. You're supposed to push the players out to the sideline, try and put him on his bad foot, doing everything you can physically do as a defender to stop him, but he couldn't be stopped. It was just one of those performances from Shane Walsh where you were like, look it. And one of those performances where you're like, I know Clifford got man of the match, and maybe
I disagreed strongly with that.
Well, of course Walsh was man of the match, but I know they probably feel entitled to give the man of the match to the winning team because they're going to be in the hotel and handing out the awards on television that evening. So I get that point of it. But if ever you're going to have a year where you throw the rule book out, I mean, Shane Walsh was the man of the match in the All-Ireland final this year.
Yeah, and you'd forget in the Armagh game where like he was amazing for so much of the game, and then like Shane would sometimes be prone to the odd thing, maybe that like he should have done something a little bit simpler in the game. And I mean, that Armagh game was absolutely bonkers, and Shane gave a terrible crossfield ball that led to the last goal, I think. So again, sliding doors moments, that was penalties, so that this could never have been written. But like, I don't know what you can say about this lad. I think he was probably given far too much criticism over the move to Dublin. We spoke to Lee Keegan. I know Shane, Kilkerran, Clonberne aren't at that level, but there's an awful lot of commitment, and then the travel and all that. And I know I'm in touch with some of the Nace lads ahead of the game on Saturday, and like at least they don't have Paul Mannion to deal with, but they do have Shane Walsh to deal with, so they didn't want the transfer to happen. But like, how can you teach somebody to be that good in left and right foot from all sorts of distances, all sorts of ranges, all sorts of angles in a game with so much pressure on it? And he didn't deserve to lose the game, obviously. No. But you're when you're taking on possibly the greatest footballer ever in David Clifford, you're like, well, okay, I can put my hands up here and say, it's funny as a Galway fan, I was at like the Limerick game, the hurling this year. I was at more or less all the championship games, the Limerick game, the hurling, and the Kerry game, and I was never as kind of less disappointed coming off a big game like that, because the Limerick hurling game had everything, and their Limerick are exceptional, and Galway pretty much left everything on the pitch, and the Kerry game was kind of the same. And I've never actually watched the game back because I don't tend to watch games back when Galway lose.
Yeah, fair enough.
It's maybe a strange thing. I probably did. I don't think I even watched the Sunday game. Maybe I did, but I certainly didn't watch the game back, so I'd have to watch back again to remember. I'm going on the memory of Shane Walsh that day. I'll never forget the awe when you're watching this, like, oh my God, how can you do this? Like, and he's only getting going, really, hopefully.
Yeah, and it's madness because Tom O'Sullivan, Dingle man, Kerry man, had an unbelievable year for Kerry this year. Unbelievable. And yet he had the unluck of marking Shane Walsh in the final and didn't get an All-Star. Like, Tom O'Sullivan must be one of the best. It must have had one of the best years for anyone who hasn't picked up an All-Star, and it's definitely down to the final. And he's so unlucky because he had the nerve to pick up Shane Walsh in the first place. But nobody could have marked Shane Walsh that day, so you feel sorry for Tom O'Sullivan.
What do Nace do now on Sunday? It's like, well, Nace are, I think, like Nace are maybe 4-point underdogs or something like that, but their Nace are in with a chance. Like last year, Mannion was playing, Mannion got injured then, and you're thinking this is amazing. But what do you do at club level? So do you change your style to stop him at county level? I think the other thing is that Kerry Galway game as much as there were elements of the defensive game in it, it was never going to be anything other than a restoration of the beauty of football.
Yeah.
When you see Walsh and, like, pound for pound, two of the most talented sportsmen like you'll see in this country, possibly two of the most talented Gaelic footballers ever. I mean, what they're doing, because the game's always improving. Shane Walsh to have that ability off his wrong foot is just staggering to me, like, you know.
And I'm sure he's had an impact on young players as well. But there's probably kids who have been starting practice both feet,
100%.
kicking points. And it's such an important skill. But Shane Walsh has just highlighted how important it is at the top level. Clifford does it as well. But I mean, imperious Shane Walsh that day. Johnny, great stuff. That was your 5th and final pick. So that is Johnny's You Had to Be There in the books.
It was so unexpected.
It's one of those you had to be there moments.
You had to be there.
It subsequently genuinely did change everything about my life.
I had to be there.
8:55 AM on this Thursday morning on OTB AM. Now we will continue with our GM. What's that? What's
I just got a text in. Great after time that you backed St. Nicholas Abbey in the without market, but I completely forgot that Farah chinned him for the place. Like, so I'd lost money on the race while Frankel went like 20 lengths clear in front of me. I was like, damn you, Frankel. No, St. Nicholas Abbey didn't. So thanks to Johnny Breach. Big Shells fan. He's looking forward to the final, obviously.
Fair play, on Sunday, of course. Continuing with our GA this morning, we're live in studio next with the new Roscommon senior football boss, Davy Burke. First, though, on last night's show, Joe, Mick and Will reflected on what they felt has been a thoroughly underwhelming Champions League group stage. Back after this.
It truly is, Will, the worst group stages we've had in living memory. Not since the double group stage period has a group stage has been so anemic.
Tonight's a particularly strange night compared to last night, where we had all the drama towards the end of Marseille and Tottenham Hotspur, where Marseille were playing particularly well, then Tottenham got an equaliser. You're thinking, can Marseille get a winner, which would potentially send them into the last 16 of the Champions League? Are Spurs going to be in danger of dropping down into the Europa League for quite some time last night? And then Højbjerg gets the breakaway and Spurs get the goal, which actually gives them top spot, which could be really important. I mean, the second seed you'd really want to avoid, if it happened tonight that Benfica get a winner, as things stand, would be PSG if they were to drop in as a second seed. But outside of that, it might be really important for Spurs' hopes in the last 16. The reports coming out last night as well, Joe, were that Marseille were unaware that they didn't necessarily have to go for the second goal last night, that they could have taken the Europa League spot. So that group was entirely on a knife edge even into 97 minutes of play, and there was loads of late drama. If you take in North London the week before, where Tottenham Hotspur were denied a very late goal against Sporting Lisbon, that group was fantastic. The end of the Atletico Madrid group a couple of weeks ago, where Atletico could have scored after a late VAR call, was tremendous fun. But tonight it's kind of a little bit of jockeying position for teams in first and second place. There's not a huge amount on the line tonight, even by comparison to last night.
Like you're jockeying for position, not knowing if the other teams are going to jockey for position. So really,
but like the jockeying for position is exactly like the Conte was basically telling Spurs don't go for a winner last night. You know, they ended up getting it on the break in the 90 whatever minute, but there was no urgency from Tottenham to go and get a win and top that group.
No,
because Liverpool are still, you know, if you look at the groups, it's pretty even in terms of it actually means nothing. You know, there's an equal amount of good teams finishing first and second.
Yeah, that's the lads on OTB last night. Joe, Mick and Will. 8:57 AM on this Thursday morning's OTB. I'm delighted to say joining myself and Johnny in studio is the new Roscommon senior football manager, Davy Burke. Morning, Davy. How are things?
Hey lads, how are you getting on?
I thought it was David Burke that was on. I was like, this is great. We're talking ball with hurling. Jeez,
this is even better.
Football,
this is even better.
Don't let my mum hear you say that, Johnny. She's very particular.
Yeah. It's funny, David. A lot of people know that you were the Whitlow senior football boss prior to this. Something that I didn't realise was that Roscommon is actually going to be less of a commute for you than Wicklow, which is interesting.
Yeah, it's brilliant. Yeah, I live in Kilcock, so I'm halfway there, to be honest with you. So yeah, it's not too bad. It's an hour and 20 from my front door really to the Hyde. So it's decent enough. Yeah.
You're the youngest, I think, Intercounty manager. Does that add with it a weight of pressure, or just maybe it's the opposite? Maybe you can feel more relaxed. Just like, oh look, I've got a few years here, lads. Give me a chance.
No, and this is my second stint of being the youngest in the county managers. No,
been there, done that.
If you're good enough, you're old enough. I wouldn't be too worried about any of that type of stuff. I never have any problem commanding respect, or I think lads just see the work ethic, etc. So I never get too bogged down in any of that.
Yes.
Your career just ended so early as well, didn't it? Like you had catastrophic injuries.
Yeah. When I was about 14, I think it was 14, I got a bad knee injury, and it was probably now you'd be sent for a scan scan straight away, whereas back then it was more x-rays. So I would have got an x-ray and I had a fractured knee, so I got casted, etc., for a couple of months. But sure, the minute I came back, the ligaments were never fixed, you know, that kind of way. So ultimately ended up with a plastic kneecap now, so I ended up doing a bad job on it altogether. And from then on in, like in my household, my mother was the county chairman, my father was the Borden and Oak chairman, managing the county teams. Like, there was no other option, you know, that kind of way. And
I can't play, so what am I going to do?
When you're being brought to central council meetings in obscure locations around the country, you get the graw fairly early. So I just went into coaching early, and that was it.
How do you think the Wicklow job has prepared you for the Roscommon gig? Because I know it's Division 1 football you're heading into now at Roscommon. A seriously tough Connacht Senior Championship with the likes of Mayo and Galway in there as well. So totally different challenge, but I'm sure the Wicklow job gave you a sense of what's ahead.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Just from dealing with county boards, dealing with charters, dealing with players, you know, dealing with that level of player. They're so competitive. They're so, for want of a better word, selfish in a good way, in that they want to achieve, and what can you do to help me get to where I want to go? And that level of demanding, and I love that. I thrive in that environment because that's where I want to be. And I learned a huge amount from Wicklow in that. And even the different dynamics between the clubs. This club mightn't get on great with that club. There's all them different dynamics you deal with every county. And so I got a huge ground in there from the media as well. It's all important. When you're in Division 1, it's a completely different ball game. I could have been in Auckland with 1,000 people maybe, you know. I think you won't have less than 7 or 8 or 10,000 in the Hyde, I'd say, for any of these games. So it's a completely different kettle of fish, but I feel I've got a good grounding from them and learned a huge amount from Wicklow, yeah. I
was up home in Monaghan there at the weekend. I was chatting to Gregory McGonigal, former Dublin ladies boss. I know you cut your teeth as well alongside him as assistant. Experience, and he was very complimentary, I have to say, about you.
Good man, Greg. I'll send that to you.
100%. Yeah. But like, what cutting your teeth with other managers and kind of learning as you went along over the years. Are you someone who kind of takes little bits from different coaches? Are you taking little bits from other sports even? Or how's your I guess coaching game been cultivated?
Yeah. Well, initially probably would have started out with my dad. I would have been probably cut out of him really in that his style, his management style, and his probably his coaching style, and then would have moved on. And probably one of the first top coaches I would have met was Greg really in 2014. We both, how that came about was we both went for the Dublin ladies job at the time, and they pieced us together. So he was much more experienced coach than me at the time, you know. So I learned a huge amount off Greg, and Greg was brilliant with the girls on the field, but he was also brilliant with county boards. He would have taught me a huge amount more. I would have been maybe a bit too direct at times and different things, right? And Greg would have taught me a lot about that. So I learned a huge amount of him. But not only that, I at the minute I'd watch a lot of NFL, I watch a lot of soccer. I don't follow anyone, but I'd be very interested in, say, the last couple of years with Liverpool their high press game, and now you're seeing the likes of where Trent is exposed because of such a high press, and where's the space? Well, the space is in behind. It's very similar if you're pressing a kick out, where are you exposed, where are you open? So I'm trying to take a lot out of everything, to be honest with you, and I understand it's all evasion, it's all field based sports, you know, and so just trying to learn from everything really, and you can pick stuff up from everything. And if there's an under 20 or under 16 game on the local pitch, or even a training session, I'll watch it for 10-20 minutes of them there, and I'll get something out of it, you know, that kind of way. Whether I say, well, I mightn't do that, but geez, I could work with that, you know, that kind of way. There's always something.
How open is Gaelic games to more like nuances and more change, like in terms of, and the innovator like you're trying to be?
Well, I think it's getting there, Johnny. I don't think there probably was a bit of a closed shop for a while. I think I'm not sure you come in with fresh new ideas. Some lads would have been, hang on here now, that's not how we used to do it. But I do think it's getting there. There's a lot more new age coaches and really dynamic people coming into it. And you know what I found? For years and years there was no sharing in the GA. Like, none of us shared. I can't tell you my secrets because I created them. Anyone who tells you they created anything is not telling you the truth, in my opinion. You know, we've all got something from somewhere and maybe put our own tweak to it, or maybe added to it, you know. But for me now, I'd have different groups of coaches that we'd be in regular contact with each other. Right, we're playing X the weekend, we're thinking of setting up like this, what do you think? Break it down. Oh yeah. Geez, you have to. Yeah. Because your brains and your management team brains are brilliant, but ultimately you need to go into it with a fresh pair of eyes and say, hang on, I'd get you there, or I'd do this, and then you tighten up, and that's how you become better.
Will that happen at Division 1 level?
Yeah, well, you mightn't be talking to your opposition lads, but there's plenty of high level coaches out there, say in the club game or in Division 2 level, that you'd be sharing with. You know, ultimately you need to, because they'll be picking your brains the following week on
reciprocal, like.
Yeah, you have to do it, and that was not there previous. You know, that's coming into it more and more.
Would you've been watching now since you were confirmed as the Roscommon boss? Like, is it a case of watching back matches from Roscommon in the last couple of years, tapes, videos, trying to catch up on club championship matches and see if there's some young players we could bring into the squad or even more experienced players? Like, what's the process been like since you got the job?
It's been a whirlwind. Oh God, it's about 7 or 8 days since it was confirmed. I think it was last Wednesday it was confirmed, and it's been hectic now. I think 7 days in the bounce. I'm in Roscommon now, so I have a very, very patient wife, lads. I don't know how much more patience she has though, but it's just trying to confirm backroom, trying to confirm like meet the senior players, trying to meet county boards, trying to sort. There's just so much to sort out, but I'm very, very close to being there. I've watched a good few videos. The Roscommon Championship games, club championship games are on YouTube, so I've access to them. I've watched a good few of them. More late night viewing, then I would have had a good grip on Roscommon the last couple of years. I would have watched a good few of their games live, and I also would have seen on telly, and also they're all available to me as well. So I'd have a fair handle on the squad and what I think might be required to maybe get a couple of inches improvement, or hopefully yards improvement. And then one of the main attractions for me is the age profile is late 20s, we'll say, of the core squad, right? So there's good 3, 4 or 5 years left in them boys, but there's some extremely talented 20 to 23 year olds coming through that they've had some really good 20 teams, really good minor teams, and probably didn't get their chance the last couple of years. Now maybe that's down to conditioning, maybe they weren't ready for their chance, maybe they weren't training well, I don't know, but we're going to get them in, and like come the first round of the league we'll hope to be a newish look to this team, because ultimately I'm trying to create competition, that kind of way, and I want fresh blood in, and these boys are talented.
Well, as people would say, why are you taking on this job? Because like what's the upside of this in terms of your Division 1 team, like on the cusp of potentially getting relegated, you can't win in All-Ireland, so why would you take a job like this? But do you think there is upside?
Oh jeez, I wouldn't be sitting here. I wouldn't be in the job if I didn't, Johnny. I think it's one of the most exciting jobs in the country, where no one expects you to stay in Division 1. No one gives you a chance. Jeez, I only love that type of crack. That kind of way. That really gets me going. And so, there's huge. They were in an under-20 All-Ireland final 2 years ago. They were won another Connacht 20s last year, the year previous. Like, there's huge talent coming, and it's untapped talent. And that's coming. And for me, looking at the senior team, I definitely think there's maybe a little balance issue, or just little small improvements there, handy wins that can be made, I think, structurally, we'll say, and the talent is there. Like, and what's the big thing about Roscommon as well? They forwards, Johnny. You would a club team, you would count, you're crying out for forwards generally, that kind of way. Whereas these guys have them in abundance, and I want to work with talented forwards now. So, for me, it's massively positive. I wouldn't believe any of that other crack, to be honest.
It's funny, like you can feed off criticism and people putting you down like that, and it's natural enough. I guarantee, even my own county Monaghan, like and Vinnie Corey's in fresh to that job as well. I guarantee Monaghan and Roscommon for the bookies. I haven't looked, but will be the two favourites to go down.
Monaghan will pull it off though. They always do.
But like it isn't that sort of thing where it's not quite the newspaper on the wall for the players, but the more people put you down and expect you to be relegated and not do anything in the championship, it kind of motivates yourself and the players probably.
Yeah, absolutely it does. I'm only new into the job, and already I'd be frustrated by the narrative or whatever, so absolutely motivates you. But having said all that, in Division 1, motivation will get you so far, lads. Division 1 is that it's ruthless. It's absolutely ruthless, and we've Tyrone up first according to the provisional fixtures, and Tyrone probably didn't have the best year last year, so you can imagine now they're gonna come in ready to go. You'd imagine now, so you can have all the motivation and all the newspaper clippings in the world. They don't mean a huge amount when the ball's thrown in. You're either prepared or you're not. You're in conditioned or you're not, and you're tactically astute or you're not. That kind of way. And so that's the 5% maybe, but the other 95 is the every day of the week, and it's the level of consistency, lads. The teams like the Roscommons, the Monaghans, the top of Division 2, they have to find a level of consistency. That's my issue. It was my opinion is the issue is might be brilliant this week and not so good next week, but you can't survive in the top level without a level of consistency.
You would have comparisons between the two of you as well, like football mad counties, like not massive population, and you would probably already attest to that. Roscommon is football mad, like. Oh yeah,
they're mental about it.
Like Wicklow isn't, in fairness.
No, it's not. No, and no, it's not. It's completely different. I could have been walking around. Now the players in Wicklow are unbelievable, County Board, but I could have been walking around Auckram or Wicklow Town for 2 years and no one had ever bat an eyelid to you. Genie in Roscommon already. I was sitting in a petrol station last night in Roscommon, and oh mother of God, the window got tapped 3 times in 10 minutes. They are.
That was the one lad.
They're mental about it. Yeah, but I love that, Johnny. That's.
Don't go to Rockford's now until you win something.
We'll hold off. Yeah.
Mark McHugh, big name in the backroom team as well, and like a lot of good vibes coming out of him in Donegal in terms of his coaching pedigree as well. Do you have the backroom team finalised, or how's that taking shape?
I'm very close to it. So the management at the minute is Mark McHugh's confirmed. Obviously, everyone will know Mark from his Donegal days. Very exciting young coach as well. I think we're fairly like-minded. Eddie Lohan, ex-Roscommon player, Kilbride man, 2 brothers as well, so they're well known in the community. And then Jerry McGowan from Sligo is also on board as coach. He's been with Clare for a number of years now. Turle Strand man, very exciting, very exciting addition to the. So that's the 4-man ticket at the minute. We'll say the backroom team is in place. There's a head of performance on site, Gary Flannery, who works for Roscommon GAA, and then there's a big backroom team like what comes with all these. It comes with all these jobs at the minute, so we're happy enough with that at the minute. There may be one more addition, I'm not certain yet, but I'm very happy that that's a fairly strong coaching ticket, selection ticket for now.
What was Mark's like-minded?
Well, what I mean is he's young, he's enthusiastic, he's energetic, and he's on a journey, like, you know, like, as in he's trying
to progress as well. Like.
Yeah, I'm not speaking for him, but yeah, he's trying to move forward essentially, you know, and very ambitious, and I came through the ladies ranks as well, as we just discussed. So some people might fear that, it's not good enough, it's a different level of football. I think ladies football is a hugely it's a hugely good high level of football at the minute, you know, that kind of way. So if you're coaching at that level with Donegal or with Dublin or with Cork or with Meath, you're a decent coach, like, you know. Even there's a contrast with Paul Carrigan there, like he's gone into the Meath seniors now, so you know, there's a huge overlap at the minute, I think, between the two. So he's just very like-minded, and I would have seen him in the trial the other day, and just were very similar, very similar. And look, he's still at the peak of his powers. He's 32 years of age, playing for Kilcar, so I think the Roscommon boys better get used to him being stuck in the middle of them during drills and stuck in the middle of them during runs, and I think that's going to add a huge layer when, rather than the likes of me with just a whistle, when someone will actually get out there and do it with you. I think it makes a huge difference, you know.
I look at managers sometimes like Davy Fitz comes to mind, Rory Gallagher comes to mind, who are all action on the sidelines, and Rory spitting in the hands and living every moment, and you're exhausted nearly looking at them. Like, watching Wicklow match as well, you'd be similar enough in that you're an all action manager on the sidelines. Like, do you go home from a match, say on a Sunday afternoon, and you must be just wrecked?
Yeah, I do, without the spitting, I do a lot of the rest of it. Look, you play, you kick every ball, you're emotionally and physically wrecked on a Sunday evening, like completely and utterly wrecked. Look, that's the style. The 3 lads you named, Davey, myself, Rory, we're coaches probably at heart, and we like to coach our teams through the games. And look, there's pros and cons to all that, but you'd be you'd be fit for nothing afterwards. Yeah.
Well, listen, what's the ambition finally for you, Davy, this year? I know when Paul Joyce took the Galway job, he said, look, I wouldn't be in this position if I didn't think we could win All Ireland, and came so close last year and getting to the final. So, like, what's the overall ambition? Is it a 3-year term?
Yeah, 3-year
term. So what's the I guess short, medium, long term goals?
Well, the short will definitely be Division 1. We're targeting, as I said, consistent level of football. We want to be training at a level and playing at a level to be a consistent top 8 team, you know, minimum. That's the short. That's 100% the short term goal. And the medium goal is obviously Connacht Championships. You know, it's a non-negotiable in Roscommon. They're looking for silverware. They're looking for Connacht Championship. And then ultimately for me, I think it's since 1991, is it, or since they were in an All Ireland semi-final. So you need to be pushing on, progress all the time. Like, I'm not going to sit here and say we're going to win Sam Maguire in the short term, but you got to be moving forward here, you know. So move forward, retain Division 1, you know, Connacht Championships, and also semi-final appearances, and then you can build from there. In my experience, you don't go from quarter-finalists to finalists. That doesn't generally happen. Like, so you have to go step by step, and so ultimately in the 3 years, 5 years, that's the plan, you know.
Listen, Davy, we wish you the very best of luck. Exciting to get this job, Division 1 role. Take it handy on Monaghan in the league, will you? The other games you can go hell for leather. But listen, thanks a million for coming up to us today.
Cheers, lad. Thanks, cheers.
That's Davy Burke, the new Roscommon senior football manager, at 9:13 AM on this Thursday morning on OTB AM. Brought to you with Gillette in association with Movember. Effortless shave, magnificent Mo. You can sign up or donate now at Movember.com. Here's what we've got on OTB Sports Radio coming up for you today. 1 o'clock, it's OTB Gold, Jerry Eisenberg on Ali. 3 PM, Leaders' Questions. From 4, it's a retro panel on violence in the GAA. 6 o'clock, an OTB Gold interview with Declan Murphy. 7 PM, OTB of course live with Richie McCormick hosting. John Giles as usual on a Thursday evening. Waterford's Desi Hutchinson will be on as well, none other than Kelly Harrington herself, talking about her brand new book. You can follow OTB across all our social channels and subscribe to the OTB Podcast Network for all the very best in the latest sports content. After the break, we're live with the former Irish Rugby international Jack McGrath ahead of the huge South African match in Dublin on Saturday. First though, Keith Wood and Fiona Hayes joined Joe on Wednesday Night Rugby last night, discussing the importance of the scrum ahead of the weekend. Back in a moment.
Do they have different techniques that you might face otherwise, or is it pretty universal?
It's fairly universal. I think if you're looking at the fundamental standard for South Africa is that they are bigger men, so they're taller. Marks is tall. Now, Dan Sheehan is tall. We're beginning to manoeuvre our way into that idea. But they tend to have a taller front row. They tend to be much bigger men. And you're talking 19, 20, 21 stone. They want to scrummage at a height. Now, the laws would lend itself that you have to scrummage not lower than your hips and you can't be too low. So that's fine, but you don't have to scrummage at the height of South Africa's hips. You can scrummage at the height of your own hips. So you try and get yourself into a position where you're able to deal with it. But they want to keep it at the highest level possible because that's where they're at their strongest. So whatever manoeuvring Ireland can do to unsettle them, because you don't want to play into their hands. You want to make them uncomfortable. You want to, even though there's no hit in the scrum, you want to try and get that balance right where you get more comfortable in the scrum. You try and offset it an awful lot. They tend to put all 8 pushing incredibly hard into it. They will try and hold the ball at the back of the scrum. So the scrums tend to last longer on their put in because they know how hard it is to hold that scrum. So they want those scrums to last as long as they possibly can and to see if they can eke a penalty out at the end of it. So the benefit of having a front row on the bench like they have is that they don't really lose any oomph when those guys come on, and it means it's very hard. And we do change our subs a little bit later, and rightly so. Our subs are not of the same standard that South Africa have. There's very few teams in the world. Probably the only teams are France, South Africa, and maybe Argentina that have that strength and depth for scrummaging that comes in off the bench. So, but I think we'd stand up to it pretty well. But it's higher. It tends to be higher. We'll be trying to bring it lower so that you can use their weight against them. That's the most important element. The second you play against South Africa is how do you use their strength against them?
OTB AM on OTB Sports Radio, Ireland's first and only sports radio station.
Have you subscribed to the OTB Football Podcast? Bruno Fernandes is one of those things where game to game now I'm just like, when do we give up? When do we give up faith in the man? Because he's got 1 goal in 13.
Was he not playing well at the start of the season?
He's playing reasonably well, but like in his first full season for United, he scored 28 goals. Now he's got 1 in 13 games.
There's so many players, like someone like Martinelli might not even get in a look in. Brazil are going to win that World Cup, lads. I think it's an absolute banker.
Subscribe now to the OTB Football Podcast stream wherever you get your podcasts and download the OTB Sports app.
OTB AM with Gillette in association with Movember. Effortless shave, magnificent modes.
17 minutes past 9 on OTB AM on this Thursday morning with myself and Johnny. Really interesting chat there with Davy Burke before the ads, the new Roscommon senior football boss. So you get that podcast back in all the usual places, wherever you get your podcasts, and of course the YouTube video up on youtube.com/offtheball. Just some breaking news for you as well from the world of football. UEFA is setting up a Nations League for women's international teams, and the qualifying for major international women's tournaments has been completely revamped. So we'll touch base more on that story from tomorrow. Kathleen McNamee will be alongside me on the hot seat for tomorrow, Friday's OTB AM. Now at 17 minutes past 9, we're joined by the former Irish international Jack McGrath on the line. Jack, a beekeeper with Open Hive, is celebrating the partnership between Camille Thai and Open Hive. Established to protect over 100,000 native Irish honeybees, the Irish restaurant group will be using the raw honey produced by these special bees and harvested by Jack and the team at Open Hive to develop a series of new dishes, including the honey crispy chicken bao, which is available now from all Camille restaurants across Ireland, Northern Ireland and the UK. Jack, good morning.
Hello. What a start, Jack.
Talk to me about the beekeeping. This is something else. I mean, was this start over COVID, or how did you get involved in the beekeeping?
Yeah, I suppose it was something I'd always been interested in through the years, but like I never saw an opportunity to actually get involved because it was just so time consuming. And then, as you said, when COVID came along, it sort of just the opportunity came up to come out to somebody local, a local beekeeper out here in Greystones, and basically that's when I met Kyle, who is the other partner in Open Hive, and he basically showed me the ropes, and it's from there it's kind of went. And then the other fella who's involved is Mark Early, so between the three of us we've kind of pushed it on from there.
I'm sure you have the suit and the visor and all that crack. Like, I've read that it's bee proof, so it keeps out the bees, but doesn't necessarily stop the stings. That must be something that takes time to get used to.
Yeah, it does. I suppose it's like anything. It's like hits in rugby. You just get used to it, but it just stops them getting in. But you can get stung, so we just kind of wear a double layer underneath the gear, and you're usually grand. You know, it's the time of year we're checking them. A lot of the time they're fairly docile because of the heat, but sometimes they get a bit ratty, and you do pick up a few stings.
Jack may or may not be a Withnail and I fan, but is like Uncle Monty. He's an unbelievable character. So he's on about flowers, and he says flowers are essentially tarts, prostitutes for the bees, right? So it's one of these amazing lines. But Jack, if there are no bees, there are no humans.
Well, that's it. Yeah, 100%. Yeah, and you know, the thing I like about it is you're learning the whole time. Every time you go up there, there's so much more to them just producing honey. So that is a huge aspect of what we try and do in Open Hive is the education around that as well, because a lot of people are scared of bees and they don't know the difference between a bumblebee and a bee that actually produces honey. So it's great, and you know, it's a nice outlet for me with everything that's gone on mentally on the pitch and off the pitch. So it's just a nice kind of escape for me as much as anything, as an enjoyment.
For your own game now, Jack, I mean, I know you're a free agent for leaving Ulster. You've been pushing on Instagram as well. Everyone can kind of see the work you've been putting in as a free agent as well. Not easily done. You've had a double hip resurfacing operation. So, like, talk us through that, because that process must be arduous, and then to try and recover from that. I mean, I think I've seen you talking before about wanting to become the first person in elite sports to come back and play elite sports after a double hip resurfacing operation. That must be tough.
Yeah, it is. But I suppose the thing is now I'm over the initial two surgeries, so I'm on the way back to getting playing. It's just the initial, probably getting the first one done and getting back from that was quite tough, because it was quite tough, but I knew I could do it because I'm actually quite friendly with Sean O'Brien, and he had it done, and I was liaising with him quite a lot through it. And when I saw him getting back, I knew that I could get back. So it was fine getting back. But then I suppose over time we realised that my left side was, when I got back playing, my right side was absolutely perfect, but it was my left side, because I had been compensating for so long, had been worn away as well. And I got a few games in with Ulster, and I was kind of getting my rhythm back, and then like a maul collapsed in the game, and it was from then I was pretty goosed, and it kind of came to the realization that we had to get the second one done, which was a bit of a kick in the teeth, and everything that went on kind of with contractually as well. But you know, it's funny, things happen for a reason, and being able to be home for, like, we just had a little girl there 2 weeks ago, so if I was in Belfast, I wouldn't have actually been able to be around for a lot of the pregnancy and the birth. So it's funny how stuff like that happens. But like, it's difficult, but the carrot for me is to be the first person. Like, there are people who have one hip done, but the carrot is definitely to be the first person to get two done, and be that at AIL level play or professional. I'm taking it bit by bit. Like, I'm not putting pressure on myself to get back as quick as I can. I just need to get everything 100% right first.
I was gonna ask you about that moment where you're trying to recover from injuries. I was even watching a couple of lads on BT Sport last night talking about the injuries and in elite sport and how much it can hurt you, and I guess that the ability to bounce back depends on player to player. But as you say there, like you're a first time dad, a new dad in recent weeks to baby Melrose. That must put things in perspective. Because
good name, actually.
Well, all of a sudden, yeah, great name.
This is Melrose's place.
Yeah. But all of a sudden you have new priorities, Jack.
It is, yeah, it is. But on one side, there's priorities like that, and on the other side, you kind of have to, when they grow up, they'll be like, well, my dad did this, like, and it's, I suppose, I've nothing to prove to anyone kind of on the pitch. It's probably the fighter in me that wants to try and even just get back and prove that I can, because like the hardest thing is your mind, really. Like, it's your mind is the only thing that can really stop you. And like I'm because it's such a hard thing to do. It's that's almost the goal for me, is to try and get through it and be like, you actually can do this, and it just proves to other people that you can. Sure, if it was easy, everyone would do it. Like it's a quite peculiar situation to have both done, because people do have one done, but like there will be people in the future that will have two done, and if I can be the first to prove that I can get back, it's just, I think it's a huge thing for me personally. Yeah.
I guess like you're on here this morning for 15 minutes or whatever, but this is a fight like within yourself that goes on behind closed doors, I suppose.
It is, yeah, and like what you're saying about the Instagram stuff, it's like you kind of have to self-promote a little bit as well. You have to put yourself out there. You have to show the work you're doing. Not everything's always rosy in the garden. Like, obviously Instagram is like, you see the positive sides of getting back running or getting back lifting heavy, but like there's shit in between the day that like really you're like, why am I doing this? And then you just have to kind of sometimes pull back and just try and control the controllables in your own mind and in your own situation. And for me, sometimes I put myself under time pressure to be back for a certain date, because that's the kind of environment I've been in for 12 years, like with Leinster and with Ulster and in Ireland. Like you get injured, you're given a time frame, you get back for them. Whereas I'm in the situation now, I'm my own boss, so like I'm managing my own rehab and everything like that. But it's that's not an excuse not to do the stuff. It's just I need to focus on the dates that I'm getting back and just take it bit by bit, basically.
Do you worry longer term, Jack, about just the professional game and what you've I guess the hits your body is taking, how it will be long term? I'm early on with rugby players. It's always a concern for me when I watch the sport.
Yeah, I suppose it is. Yeah, and like I'll know when I do get back training fully and playing games, and my hope is to get back and try and play some AIL games with St. Mary's, because obviously Sean Cronin, that's my club, and Sean Cronin's the head coach, and I know Sean pretty well from through the years. So I've sort of made a commitment to try and get back there, and I'll know myself after probably a year if I'm ready to go. So like the plan would be to try and get back, see if I'm good, see if I'm still enjoying it, and go from there.
Well, those when you're talking about big hits, Jack, Andy Farrell's Irish team have a few big hits heading away on Saturday at the Aviva Stadium. A few slightly more than bee stings, I'd imagine, them Springboks coming at you. But how do you feel about the Irish team heading into the November internationals, and specifically for Saturday? Because a lot of talk about the South African front three and the bomb squad and the 6-2 split on the bench they have, and these just huge specimens of men that the Irish team are coming up against on Saturday. It's no easy task.
Oh, it's not, and I think against South Africa, it's always an acid test of how your pack is actually going. I think the the strides that has happened in the Irish pack and in the team in the last, since Andy has taken over, is incredible. You saw it over the summer and before that. I think the way Ireland are playing, they're going to put South Africa under pressure, but I think the nuts and bolts around the scrum and the maul and the breakdown is going to be huge, because you saw South Africa pick their team early. They're putting out they're nailing their colours to the flag, and they've put a 6-2 split, so they know it's going to be a forward battle and it's going to be wet. So it's an interesting one.
Serious speed of that rush defence from the South Africans as well. Do you think it's going to tell us more about ourselves nearly than the South Africans? And there's the element, of course, because we're in the same World Cup pool next year, and we've spoken about it with Alan Quinlan earlier in the week, but shadow boxing, is there an element of that, do you think, Jack, heading into a game like this when you know you're in the same pool, or is it just they're separate things and maybe treat it as just one big game to get prepared, I guess, for the World Cup this far out?
Yeah, I think it's a stepping stone. I don't think Ireland have named their team as well, so it could be they're not going to be experimental, but it could be an opportunity to drop one or two guys in, because as we know, the World Cup is a squad effort. So if they are in the group, it's a huge opportunity for him to maybe drop one or two players in. But I wouldn't be reading massively into it, because a lot changes in those kind of 6 or 8 months. So I think it's just going to be a massive physical test, and I'm actually getting to go to it, so it'll be the first time I've gone to an Irish game since I've been actually playing there. Right. So it'd be nice to be seeing it live. Yeah, it'd be nice to be seeing it live.
Flogging honey all over the shop.
yeah.
It's the team, as you said, not named, but I guess if you're to look at the Irish 15 to play the New Zealand 15 on tomorrow night, you can kind of make some guesses, like Hugo Keenan, Mac Hansen and Balakoon potentially as a back 3 if you're to read into that team, and the players that haven't been named. Robert Balakoon is someone who you've played with at Ulster. I mean, seriously talented player, and this game at the weekend is going to be a real litmus test for him.
Yeah, the cat is what we call him up there. He's an absolute freak of an athlete, one of the most humble fellas you'll ever meet, and he's just willing to learn, and he just goes about his business, got Ulster out of a lot of trouble, attack and defence. He's a smart rugby player, doesn't take himself too seriously, but he's got the X factor, and he's a guy who is definitely pushing his way to be starting consistently for Ireland.
How do you see it going, the November tests generally, and then a long-term one for you as well, Jack, the hope that we can maybe progress at some distance in the World Cup? How do you see the next 12 months going for Irish rugby?
I think the experience that's there, I don't think we will fall into the trap of peaking too early. I think there's too many guys there that have been to too many World Cups and know. I think Andy Farrell is a top quality coach. The guys in the backroom staff with him have all gone to World Cups. I think they'll get the prep 100% right. And I think on your first question, I think it'll be a clean sweep for the November internationals, 3 wins.
Can I just ask you one final one, Jack? It just struck me when you were talking there earlier about the, Instagram and having to put yourself out there, and also being fully aware that Instagram is a semi-fake world in many ways, and I guess people can take it with a pinch of salt what we all put forward on social media. I know you've done a lot of great work with Pieta House, and you've spoken about your own family story as well, eloquently at times. That's an important thing. It must be for dressing rooms at the minute, especially with young players, to be aware of things like social media and social media abuse and even abuse from the terraces, and not just in rugby, generally speaking, for young people to look after themselves and the mental side of things.
I think so, yeah, and I think it's way more open forum now for people to talk to each other, and there's things in place now around clubs. There are people involved in the clubs that you can go and speak to at any stage, about it, about anything that's going on. And like for me as a player, as a senior player, I would have always tried to speak to younger guys and just like there was never a hierarchy. So even if they did want to say something to me that they might have felt was stupid, they could say it and I wouldn't say it to anyone. So no, I definitely think the way the world is now, definitely rugby is changing as a landscape. You don't have to be just this macho fella that doesn't have any feelings. Like, you're not a robot. So I think when guys are actually open about how they feel and their emotions and stuff like that, you actually get the best out of them as a player because they can express themselves.
Absolutely. Hear, hear. Listen, Jack, you've been great with your time. Really appreciate you chatting to us. Enjoy the beekeeping and most of all enjoy the match on Saturday as well.
Cheers, lads.
Great stuff. Jack McGrath there, of course, the former Leinster, Ulster, Ireland, Lions, loosehead prop, and as he said, he's a free agent but working really, really hard to recover from those hip operations and to get back to playing the game he loves. So Jack McGrath there, and you can get that full interview if you missed any of it, as always, in the OTB Sports app and on the YouTube as well. OTB AM, 9:35 AM on this Thursday morning, brought to you with Gillette in association with Movember. Effortless shave, magnificent Mo. You can sign up or donate now at Movember.com. OTB AM is back tomorrow morning. I'll be joined by Kathleen McNamee in studio as we focus on Ireland's showdown with the Springboks. Daniel Davey will be in studio to chat about his new nutrition book, plus more besides, including more on the breaking news from this morning about that new UEFA Women's National Team competition. Right now, though, we're leaving you with the remainder of Wednesday Night Rugby. Enjoy. See you tomorrow. Good luck.
Very happy to say Keith Wood is with us. Good evening.
Good evening, Joseph.
And Fiona Hayes, Grand Slam winner as well. Evening, Fiona.
Hey Joe, how are you?
Very good. So Keith, neutral venue, your life depends on it. Who is the best team in the world? Who are you picking to represent you?
That's absolutely thrown me straight into it. Today.
Right now. The gun to your head.
Who'll win a game could be, I don't know if it's Ireland. It would be Ireland, New Zealand or France at the moment. But asking me exactly who would win today, it depends who they're playing.
They're playing whoever your second option is, I suppose. The next best. And Ireland know it's to save Keith Wood's life as well. I don't know if that offers them an extra impetus.
What? Ireland know it's to save my life. They might throw the game. I would go with a team that knows how to win in the very big competitions, and that would be South Africa. It would be South Africa or New Zealand, but not New Zealand this year. So it could be South Africa.
All right, okay. Fiona, who's saving your life?
You know me, Joe, I always back my own. I'm going to have to go with Ireland, playing great rupby at the minute. So look, we'll go with Ireland. We haven't seen enough of France. I would have been France up into recent, but they've been keeping quiet. Maybe that's a good thing for them, but we'll see going forward.
Okay, well, we'll get a good look at both, obviously, on Saturday, and there's been much talk of world champions and world number one side, and so hence the question. The Ireland A team has been named for this game against the All Blacks 15 on Friday, and that gives us numerous clues as to what team Andy Farrell is going to name for Saturday when he names it tomorrow. So Michael Lowry, Jacob Stockdale, Jimmy O'Brien, amongst others, start on Friday. So it generally leads most observers to conclude that Hugo Keenan will start, Matt Hansen will start, and Robert Balakoon will start in the back three for Ireland. Craig Casey plays on Friday. He captains the team on Friday, actually. So Gibson Park's going to feature for the first time this season. Conor Murray, we knew already, would win his 100th cap on Saturday. Andy Farrell had said as much. And Kieran Frawley, Jack Crowley, both involved Friday, so we can assume Joey Carberry is fit to take his place on the bench. So the general effort at naming the Irish team is Hugo Keenan, full-back, Balakoon, Ringrose Henshaw centre, Mac Hansen on the wing, Johnny Sexton and Gibson Park to start, Andrew Porter, Dan Sheehan, Tyke Furlong the front row, second row Tyke Byrne, James Ryan, and then the guesses I've seen, Peter O'Mahony, Josh van der Fleer, Caelan Doris with Jack Conan on the bench. So is that largely how you'd see it, Fiona? We're not missing anything glaring there, I think.
No, I think that looks like the way it's going to go, and especially with the Ireland A team. I wasn't sure about that back three, Joe, but I think that's kind of set in stone who they're going to go with. And I suppose the pictures that we see of them training and stuff, and who's in bibs and whatnot during the week, you can get a sneaky look into who will be starting as well. So I think you're spot on there.
Keith, what effect do you think Saturday has on the World Cup meeting?
I don't know. I think it would be. I think it's incredibly important for Ireland to try and back up what they've done this year, and without stepping back from the initial question that you asked me, I would tip Ireland to win at the weekend. But the manner in which Ireland have played has been a bit of a change from what we've had over the previous 2 years. It is something that has seems to be incredibly comfortable for the players. So I think Andy Farrell has made the players it's simple but has a lot of options, and it's about people making the right decision, but having 4 or 5 options, and they decide which one they want at different times. And I think that they're good footballers, so that suits them, and I think they look happy playing it, and they look like they're enjoying themselves an awful lot. And every piece of noise you hear is that they're enjoying themselves. There's a lot of fun in this. So how will South Africa pick holes in that? Because South Africa have and had consistently had the ability of demolishing different types of structures and imposing their way of playing. And Ireland need to find out whether there are chinks in that style, because there are going to be chinks in that style over the next 12 months, and it's how do Ireland react to it. So I think it's coming at the perfect time, because it's an awkward, difficult, heavy-hitting type contest that will knock them out of, I won't say they're in a comfort zone, but it'll knock them out of the sort of rosy glow that they've had after winning a series down in New Zealand. So how do they react to it? And can they react to it within the 80 minutes to get the win? My belief is that they will. And it comes back to your question at the very start. Will that then be good enough in a World Cup? Would it be good enough for, this is the one game that you have to have a team to win? I don't know if we're there yet, but I think we've a better idea of that conversation after this weekend, because this is incredibly heavy hitting.
Yeah. Andy Farrell, on the heavy hitting point, Fiona, referenced the French game and said there'll be parallels here with that night in Paris, and another kind of examination under the scrutiny of heavy hitting on Saturday. The other thing to mention, I know you watch South Africa right across the year. Any of the games I saw, what jumps out immediately about their defence, as well as the heavy hitting, is just the speed of that rush defence. I mean, they shoot up, and they really shoot up. So how is the Irish attack equipped to handle the heavy hitting and that rush defence?
Yeah, I suppose we're gonna see on Saturday. I mean, that's the first thing that kind of came into my head when I saw this fixture, especially after the All Black series, is, you know, scrum, maul, physicality around the pitch. The All Blacks probably didn't bring that enough during the summer, you know, so we obviously came away from those games feeling very confident. But the last team that we did play was France in Paris, and I suppose we didn't come up trumps in that game, so we're going to have to look at how we can deal with that. And, you know, that blitz defence that the South African bring is really, really good, but they also have players in the midfield that are really, really good at making those defensive reads on when to come up, when to kind of shoot out, or when to leave Ireland play ball. They come up hard in the centre, especially in that pack area, so Ireland have to be able to get gain line going forward. I think it's gain line will be a big thing on Saturday, Joe, how we can get go forward ball to create that extra bit of space for the backs. And it's when you create that space out wide, that's when you have to, that South African defence have to question themselves. Can they shoot up? Do they have to hold? And we'll see if we're able to earn that right to go wide then.
Yeah, the other thing I suppose, Keith, and to an extent this goes for every game because the breakdown is clearly important in every game, but Ireland thrive on fast ball. And again, you think back to that game in Paris, for instance, France did a real number on Ireland at times at the breakdown with big men, and that they went after Ireland at the breakdown. And it is notable, Keith, that they have Dion Forey and Quagga Smith both on the bench, both, renowned poachers who can really go after Ireland at the breakdown. So you suspect slowing Irish ball down is going to be, and again, I appreciate that's a week in, week out kind of aspiration, but that's going to be big for South Africa, you would think.
Well, it's going to be big for South Africa, but big for Ireland to try and enact fast balls. So we have to resource the rucks quickly enough. It can't become an arm wrestle. One of the elements of playing South Africa is that they are incredibly physical. You have to meet the physicality, but you don't have to copy their style of play. And actually, too often, I think that happens, and you get stuck into an arm wrestle. So it's talking about almost hyper efficiency at breakdown, both from the ball carrier to make certain he can fight his way to the ground, kind of old school almost, to be able to get the ball back to where he's going to be, and the supporting players to make certain that they can seal that off legally and make certain that they're almost tackling the tackler. There was a great example years and years ago, Dave Wilson, who was the Australian captain, and as you were going into contact, he would tackle you, even though he was playing with you. So I played with him for Quins, and he tackled the ball so that by the time you hit the ground, he was already popping the ball to the scrum half. And it meant nobody could get anywhere near that ball. So his idea of being a 7 was not to be there for an offload. It was to make certain that the scrum half had the quickest ball known to man. And that was an interesting way of doing it. I'm not saying that we'll do something like that, but we need to make certain that the players that we have supporting are in the perfect position to target the jackler, so the jackler never gets into that position at all. And we've seen an awful lot of instances over the last couple of weeks where jacklers have been wiped out because a player has been a second or second and a half too late, and they've almost had to throw themselves in to have the necessary momentum to move that player, and it's resulted in penalties and yellow cards and red cards. So it's that attention to detail at that breakdown is essential for Ireland.
I think as well, on that, Keith, as well, I think, if things aren't going to plan, they have to have a plan B, that if they're not, you can practice cleaning out these rucks and you can be efficient around that area, but you have to have something else in attack if it's not working. So I suppose they're going to have to look at that area and obviously have a few different options. In an ideal world, we'll be getting that quick ball, but if Ireland aren't getting quick ball, we need to be able to attack and not fall into that South African trap as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And well, given that we've the two of you on, it'd be remiss of us not to talk about set piece and scrum, given South Africa's strength in this regard for Saturday. So they've gone with a 6-2 split at the on the bench, and I think there's almost a misnomer that they always go 6-2, whereas in the Rugby Championship just gone, of the 6 games, they only went 6-2 for 3 of those games. So New Zealand twice and Argentina. Otherwise, they were 5-3. In the Line Series, they went 6-2 once. That was in the second test. And if you want a kind of broad feel for things, then since the Line Series, they've played 16 matches and they've gone 6-2 in 9 of them. So just past halfway. So they've gone 6-2 against Ireland at the weekend. And Malherbe always plays a tight head. Marks of late has been starting, and I was talking to somebody who really knows the South African rugby, and he was saying the way they do it is they tend to work in pairs. So if Mark starts, then Kickoff works with him, and then they have Ineche and Mbonambi as a pair to come off the bench. We have Keane Healy, Rob Herring, Finlay Bealham to come off the bench. So this is to what extent is this an area of concern, Fiona? Certainly the replacement trio, there is a question mark there. What about our starting front three against their starting front three?
I think they can be fairly confident going in the starting three. It's that bomb squad is where there's been issues in the past when they come on, and they sometimes even change them up before half time, because they can add that physicality, and it's very hard to scrum while you're tired. Ireland haven't been doing that. I suppose when we look at the last Six Nations, we had a lot of players, even with Leinster at times, we see them both leaving on Porter and Furlong, probably longer than a lot of teams would do. So look, we know at the start of the game that the scrums, they'll have that down. They'll be holding their own. But I think it's after that half-time mark where there's changes need to be made. And look, some of these guys have been standing up. I've looked at Beelum. I think his scrummaging has come on an awful lot with Connacht. And it's these big, massive games against these absolutely huge props where we can see really, can they dig deep and can they hold their own ball especially.
Keith, you've been up against it. I mean, you can think back to 97 and famous team talks caught on video. There's a ferociousness to South African scrums, I presume. Do they have different techniques that you might face otherwise, or is it pretty universal?
It's fairly universal. I think if you're looking at the fundamental standard for South Africa is that they are bigger men, so they're taller. Marks is tall. Now, Dan Sheehan is tall. We're beginning to manoeuvre our way into that idea. But they tend to have a taller front row. They tend to be much bigger men. And you're talking 19, 20, 21 stone. They want to scrummage at a height. Now, the laws would lend itself that you have to scrummage not lower than your hips and you can't be too low. So that's fine, but you don't have to scrummage at the height of South Africa's hips. You can scrummage at the height of your own hips. So you try and get yourself into a position where you're able to deal with it. But they want to keep it at the highest level possible because that's where they're at their strongest. So whatever manoeuvring Ireland can do to unsettle them, because you don't want to play into their hands. You want to make them uncomfortable. You want to, even though there's no hit in the scrum, you want to try and get that balance right where you get more comfortable in the scrum. You try and offset it an awful lot. They tend to put all 8 pushing incredibly hard into it. They will try and hold the ball at the back of the scrum. So the scrums tend to last longer on their put in because they know how hard it is to hold that scrum. So they want their scrums to last as long as they possibly can and to see if they can eke a penalty out at the end of it. So the benefit of having a front row on the bench like they have is that they don't really lose any oomph when those guys come on, and it means it's very hard. And we do change our subs a little bit later, and rightly so. Our subs are not of the same standard that South Africa have. There's very few teams in the world. Probably the only teams are France, South Africa, and maybe Argentina that have that strength and depth for scrummaging that comes in off the bench. So, but I think we'd stand up to it pretty well. But it's higher. It tends to be higher. We'll be trying to bring it lower so that you can use their weight against them. That's the most important element. The second you play against South Africa is how do you use their strength against them.
So do you think Ireland can break even on Saturday in that regard?
Because there's no hits anymore, it makes a big difference. But the pressure is colossal. And it also depends on the amount of rugby that all the players have played, and you're looking at it. So what you're trying to say is, let's get our scrums, the ball in, the ball out, clean strike to number 8, and let's move. Pick an odd scrum when you have the ball to have a go at them, but try not to crumple at any stage. Nobody wants it to crumple, but it's sometimes you can go around the corner, and if you go around the corner, you have to do it so unbelievably slowly so that you don't lose your cohesion in a front row, so that somebody doesn't kind of stumble and you get pushed in over on top of yourself. I think Ireland can stand up to it for a lot of the game. I think it's very hard to stand up for it for 80 minutes. And it requires all 8 forwards to actually feed into that.
Yeah, well, that's the thing, Fiona.
And requires 9 to be unbelievably sharp and smart.
As in get it out.
The ball sitting at the back of your own scrum, you have to know that they're under pressure. Yeah. You have to get the bloody ball out. You can't be leaving it there thinking what you're going to do next.
Spoken like a front rower who's been in absolute hell as the number 9 was having a glance around for a few minutes.
I've killed a couple of scrum halves in my time for the exact same thing, So look, when you're under pressure, the key part is to try and get a clean strike. And I know the ball doesn't go in straight anymore, but if it gets stuck around the second row and the second row has to stand over it, lift its foot up a little bit, that can destabilise the scrum. And when you're under huge pressure, you don't want that to happen. So you're looking for a clean strike to number 8. If it's at number 8's feet, and if the scrum half can gauge what the pressure is like, you can have the guys to say, let's leave it there and let's see if we can get one over them. But other than that, get it out of Dodge.
Yeah. Fiona, I bet we can put too much on the front row as well. Having a look at some South African media, they're definitely looking at YHtBT and De Jager in the second row, and looking at Ryan and Byrne and talking about that as a real area where South Africa can get on top of Ireland.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we know exactly what Ty Byrne can bring at back row. I've said it before, second row, probably not quite, as he hasn't played enough, I suppose, in there really to be one of the best scrummagers you could possibly have playing in that position. We know Ryan can bring it. Henderson is a man that you'd love to have behind you in the scrum. So those two South African second rows, and your man on the bench, he was playing over in England, Franco Mostert. I mean, he's another big guy to come on in there. So they definitely scrum time. I think that's where they might have a slight advantage, especially on that tight head side. He's just immense power they can bring through, and they've worked together for so many years. But I think the more we see Byrne in there, and he's been getting more game time in there, especially with Ireland. I'm sure they're working on that. They're working with him to be able to sustain that pressure and be able to take that. So it is somewhere. A lot of times we do look at the front row, we blame the props or we blame the hookers, but there just might not be that power coming in from behind, or it could be a slight adjustment in height could offset the whole thing. So they're going to have to be absolutely, working as one, combined and focused for all these scrums.
Yeah, what's your sense of second row here, Keith?
Look, I think the South African second row is excellent. They used to pick Mostert as well, but haven't, because Peter Steph Dutoy is there. He's a huge man as well in the back row. So normally you'd say, well, they've got really big guys, but how agile are they? How comfortable are they? Can you do a bit of damage in them in the line out? And we have guys we can throw up into the air really well, which we do, but it's going to make that very tough as well. This is why this is a really enjoyable game to call, an enjoyable game to watch. Is South Africa huge, and we have to learn how to deal with it. So we're going to learn an awful lot about ourselves within this, and we've had some of this discussion in the past, but we don't make those size of men, and we don't have them. So you have to play differently, smarter, more agile, think a little bit differently. And look, the examples for that, for the most part, have been New Zealand consistently against South Africa. It's one of the huge rivalries, the biggest rivalry probably in world rugby. And it's two absolutely contrasting styles. They're just totally different styles. But New Zealand never try and play like South Africa. They will try and meet the level of aggression and physicality, but they don't try and copy them. And look, we watched the Lions, the last Lions tour, and for me, I thought, the Lions were within an ass's roar of actually winning the series, right? So it's hard to kind of criticize it in terms of a pure winning idea. It was very nearly right. However, it was a terrible spectacle of rugby, because you had two teams trying not to play rugby, or one team trying to limit another team playing, and South Africa playing the style that they've played for as long as they ever have. And I never criticize South Africa for their style, because it works. It works incredibly well. They've huge players. They've got fast wingers that they can, if there's a mistake that's made, yes, they can push them over from a scrum or from a line-out or a maul, but equally well, if they wear them down, they've got guys that can score from anywhere. That's the style that they play. I just don't think we need to match it. And for me, that's the Lions did that the last time. It made for hard watching, and so, yes, it could have been close to it, but I don't know whether it would have been better if the Lions had tried to play to their own strengths.
Yeah, I think we all kind of remember Finn Russell's introduction and suddenly the whole thing opening up in a way that hadn't seemed possible for the previous 2.5 games. On South Africa and their weapons, Fiona. Not least because that Lions tour, when, to be fair to them, they had almost no fitness. It was COVID, and they just almost did what they had to do to win, and the spectacle be damned. Over the last year, even a casual eye on their rugby championship games, they do score some electric tries. I mean, maybe they'd only play in these moments or these flashes, but with Colby at fullback, and apparently the fans have really been calling for that, and so they've gone with Colby at fullback. Arenza, lightning on one wing, Mapimpi on the other wing. I mean, they do score devastating tries at times as well. Like, it absolutely will be a surprise to no one, especially as the game opens up, if that back three do some damage.
Yeah, that's it. It's that counter-attack. They're just immense. We saw it even with the South African teams in the URC. If you kick the ball away, we saw it in that Leinster game as well. They can be quite electric. You know, they know where to attack. They like to move the ball when you give them that space. And, you know, when a defensive system is setting up, I think that's when they can really do damage. Colby at full-back, I mean, he's kicking game. Even he hasn't played with South Africa since July, so he's chomping at the bit, I'd say, to get out there and show exactly what he has. We all know it. We've seen him with Toulon. You know, he's probably played a bit at fullback, obviously, with Toulon, and the coaching staff have been watching that, and they want to get him in there, and they want to have these options where he can play wing, he can play fullback. And I think there is even chat that if there is an injury, he might even be going into out half as well. So it could be interesting to see with that 6-2 if there's injuries in the back line, at 9, 10 or 12, what they do and how they jig things around. Yeah. But look, I mean, Ardenisi, I mean, he was absolutely in the championship. He was the player to watch. I know he had that 4-week ban. He tackled Bowden Barrett. It was a pretty bad one in the air, but other than that, in the games he played, every time he got the ball, he just was absolutely electric and almost Colby-esque. You know, that you wouldn't even know he was playing. He wears the scrum pack, similar style, similar set of feet, and you have a back three that can absolutely attack from anywhere. So it will be interesting if Ireland give them that space and buy into that kicking game. We'll see exactly how South Africa are going to attack that defensive system setting up.
OTB AM with Gillette in association with Movember. Effortless shave, magnificent modes.